Hello, welcome to the Fanfic Majesty. If you want more content, you can follow me on Patreon. I will be uploading more content on there that will be exclusive. The link is in the description. Please support me. 3SS Chapter 51, a small stone engraved with the word Hayden. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. White hair, black eyes, white snow on the sleeves that freeze the sky. What the hell? When did I become so powerful? Why didn't I know it myself? Hayden's brain couldn't process the information just captured from the newspaper for a while, and his brain was chaotic. As for the other companions who surrounded him next to him, they will finish reading the newspaper report together, and their situation is not much better. Although the color of the hair and eyes of the person in the photo are different, but the clothes he wears, his facial features, and the saber in his hand, the person in the photo is clearly not wrong with Hayden. Hayden can be said to meet them almost often, and they will never mistake Hayden's appearance. But there is another but. In the past, when Hayden set out on missions, although Hayden was already strong enough, his freezing ability and the power of natural fruits were almost the same, but they did not realize that Hayden was as powerful as reported in newspapers. What? That changed the celestial phenomenon. The traces left by the slash. That is not the Hayden they're familiar with. At the same time, all over the world. Marine Headquarters, Marine Fodor, the office of General Sengoku. General Zhang Guo was sitting at his desk holding a teacup and taking a sip of tea, ready to read the newspaper he brought just now. The naval hero, Lieutenant General Karp, who had just returned from the voyage, was not surprisingly also in the general office of the Warring States. General Sengoku didn't care at all, as if he didn't think there was such a person in this room. He took a sip and picked up the newspaper on the table and read it. There was nothing to pay attention to in the front page report, and the Warring States continued to turn back calmly, until it reached the sea storm. Advertisement. Immediately. The big headline on the sea wind and cloud plate caught his eye. The world's #1 swordsman in the future. Thinking like this in his heart, the Warring States, who was a little curious, read on. The Navy. Zephyr. And the strange white-haired recruit. Judging from the reports in the newspaper and the attached photos, since the white-haired recruit has such strength, how could I not know his name? Why are all the faces of this mysterious person painted with question marks? Also, our Navy didn't stuff money for their newspapers, right? This report brought a lot of questions to General Sengoku. Suspected of the strength of the great swordsman, coupled with his freezing ability, Sengoku couldn't help but feel his chin and think. Wait, the Warring States suddenly thought of something. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Immediately, the Warring States handed the newspaper to Karp, who was aside. Kapu read the report in this newspaper. Do you know this recruit? Huh? Karp took the newspaper without thinking and looked down. Bala bara. Karp finished the page with a glance. A group of little ghosts led by Zephyr, who use swords and have the ability to freeze. Isn't this the little ghost that Kuzan brought back before? Thinking of this, Karp said casually. This seems to be the kid that Kuzan brought back before, the kid with a knife that can freeze people with the sword all day, and the bald kid. There seemed to be memories of time flashing in his eyes. Hayden. After Karp's reminder, the Warring States also immediately remembered that Kuzan, who used to be lazy, would bring a kid back to the headquarters, and suddenly remembered Hayden, who had no surname but only a name. It's only been a few years. That kid is so amazing. Karp continued to eat the senbei while sighing, but the expression on his face didn't seem to surprise him. Advertisement. General Zhang Guo looked at Hayden in the photo, but silently thought of O'Hara in 2002. As for what he was thinking, no one knew what he was thinking. In the second half of the Great Route, in a kingdom on an island in the New World. A young boy with shining blonde hair and a perfect face is walking on the streets of the island with a white horse. From time to time, the beautiful young lady can't help but scream because of her handsome self. At this time, the newsstand on the street on the right attracted his attention, mainly the one placed in the middle of many newspapers, and the most important thing was the photo posted on that newspaper. The teenager strolled leisurely to pick up this newspaper. Suddenly, the character in the photo was like a sharp arrow that had already been shot, which pierced deeply into his chest. That pure and white hair seemed like no other in the world, and the deep eyes could draw people directly in. In the storm, one sword and one move extinguished. Hayden's arrogant demeanor was deeply engraved in the hearts of young teenagers. His eyes seemed to be shining with golden light, staring closely at Hayden in the photo, and then he fumbled around and bought the newspaper without saying a word. The first half of the Great Route is on an unknown island in the Paradise. The 7 Great Sea Pirates recognized by the world government, one of the king's Kiwahai, Crocodile, who failed to challenge the White Beard, returned to the Paradise to lick his wounds. The newsbird flew by and delivered today's new newspaper. Clockdoll sat on the fallen tree trunk and read the newspaper in his hand. Most of the front is useless information, all the way to the big C. The title of the section did not attract his attention, but the words, Peachy Island of the Kingdom of Kamabaka, caught his attention immediately. Advertisement. He looked a little worried and quickly continued to look down. The following report told him that Embryo Evikov, the queen of the Kingdom of Kamabaka, got into the navy and attracted the general's dispatch. After the two sides fought against each other, Evikov was easily captured by the general. Then came a lot of nonsense about the navy and what shit people. He didn't care about the navy and others fighting to death. But the report is almost gone in this paragraph, and the whole article does not contain the news he most urgently wants to know. Clockdoll's face suddenly became gloomy, and the cigar in his mouth became a little deformed because of the squeezing of his teeth, and he held the newspaper in his right hand and clenched his palms subconsciously. Evikov. On some unknown tropical island on the Great Route. Joracle Mahawk, the guy known as Eagle Eye Mahawk, is reunited with the redhead Shanks pirate. Although the appearance of the two is still slightly young, their strength at this time cannot be easily ignored in the sea. Hawkeye, wearing a floral shirt, looked at today's newspaper. The scene reported in the newspaper that Hayden slashed after the slash was no different from the scene after the Battle of the Great Swordsman. This picture immediately left Hawkeye behind. Broadsword was about to move. Joracle Mihik, who is determined to be the world's largest swordsman, hopes to fight with all the swordmasters in the world, and then ascend the first throne. Now that a new swordsman appeared, how could he not let Yinyan's heart get excited? Shanks next to him took the newspaper, and laughed after reading it, without any extra thoughts. As for the sea, there are many famous and unfamiliar people who have read this report at different times and made their own reactions, although most of them did not take it to heart. They threw them away after reading it. The report about Hayden's matchup of the mysterious man is like a small pebble, thrown into a pond that is not considered to be the sea, and the slight ripples that appear at this time do not know what reaction it will cause. Chapter 52. After years of trance, just like yesterday. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Hayden is awesome. Big Brother is amazing. After Hayden and his dog legs read this report, there was a dead silence at first, and then various rainbows came towards Hayden's face. They didn't have any feelings of jealousy because of Hayden's true strength reported in the newspaper. On the contrary, they were all excited about Hayden's strength, and there was a good Hayden hiding so deeply. Immediately, Hayden and his group started fighting on the deck of the warship, and suddenly made a disturbing noise. It's just that although Hayden knew every word in the newspaper, it would be a bit daunting. He didn't understand what happened. Surrounded by doglegs, Hayden in the middle of the crowd swayed like a grass, swaying in the wind. What do I have white hair? Still thinking about this question, Hayden's ears suddenly caught a sentence from the overlapping sounds. Hayden, you weren't human back then, the voice came from Bedwell. I'm going to you. Hayden just wanted to subconsciously take it back, but Bedwell's words reminded him strangely. Immediately Hayden frowned, muttering to himself, it's not a person. Not a person, bye. That white hair and black eyes shouldn't be my imaginary personality. Advertisement. How come I haven't exchanged the virtual yet, and just take over my body directly like this, damn. Every time you redeem something, the points needed next time will be doubled. As for the points required to redeem the virtual category, Hayden had already automatically blocked it, so that he didn't remember it for the first time. In the past, I didn't find anything weird in my inner world during the Blade Zen. In the last Blade Zen, he could already see the snow and ice world in the inner world of Shu Baishui. He had a hunch that it would probably be just this time be able to get the approval of Shu Baishui and learn the Wan Jia. But he still didn't notice any mess in his inner world. This would know that there was a second person living in his body, and Hayden felt a very uncomfortable feeling. However, at this time, Teacher Zephyr in the cabin walked out of the room because of their noise on the deck. He looked down and just noticed that Hayden, who was unconscious, woke up and stood in the middle of the crowd. The West Sea in the Four Seas, a remote town on an ordinary island. The gray morning makes Robin wake up habitually. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. It is about 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and the pea-sized raindrops have been falling from last night to the present, and the temperature in the air is constricting and trembling slightly. The sound of rain hitting the ground in my ears is so pure and calm, and there is no sound of other people's footsteps. 5 years have passed since the O'Hara incident in 1502. Nicole Robin, who looks like a child, has also grown into a slim girl. Even if she is wearing dirty clothes at the moment, she can't hide her talent. She doesn't know how she survived since then, but she always has her own obsession, her own dream in her heart. Robin is now hiding in the utility room outside the family's house in the town. It is a small house made of wooden boards. The technique is extremely rough. There is no place where there is a tight fit. The cool night breeze blows in. Rain it also dripped from the top of the head without knowing where. Advertisement, but people don't come here often, and this is what Robin needs most now. Just escaped arrest by a group of people yesterday. As long as there is a safe place where no one can find her to sleep, she is very satisfied. Robin, who woke up at this time, was lying on the edge of the door, looking out from the crack of the door. With the fog in the morning and the light rain that has not stopped at the moment, the visibility outside the house is not very clear, but the outside world is quiet, and basically no one has gotten up at this point. Thinking about changing places today, Robin opened the utility room door and walked into the light rain. Robin just found a raincoat with a hole in the back from the utility room and hid her face under the hat of the raincoat. She walked through this quiet town and walked under the eaves of the house on the side of the street. The boots under my feet made the chuckle of the masonry road. From time to time, there were noises from the surrounding houses. In the dark alleys passing by, there were tramp-like people crawling in the sewage. All this made Robin feel an inexplicable bad feeling in his heart at this moment. She subconsciously speeded up her pace and rushed to the port. Later, she must successfully get on a boat to leave the island. She was thinking about what to do after arriving at the port. Suddenly, Robin, who walked quickly along the eaves of the house, noticed that someone had thrown a pile of discarded newspapers on the big wooden box in front of the house. The cover photo on the top of the newspaper seemed to be pulling her to the newspaper side, making her involuntarily pick up the newspaper from a few days ago. And the photo posted in the newspaper was the white-haired Hayden who raised her sleeves and was facing the sky. Hayden's facial features are very clear in this newspaper's secret shooting with a phone bug. The eyes are eyes and the nose is nose, even if the shooting environment is in a storm. At once, Hayden's photo is like a lightning from nature that strikes Robin's heart fiercely, splitting the memory that has been sealed 5 years ago. Although it was only a few days of memory, it seemed to occupy Robin's entire mind at this moment, as if it was yesterday. Advertisement. The hands holding the newspaper trembled uncontrollably. The cold wind blew the rain on the newspaper and hit her body. She trembled uncontrollably all over her body, and suddenly a strong wave emerged from their suffocation. O'Hara, Hayden, Robin, who was unconscious, covered his mouth and nose with his right hand, not letting himself cry, even though the tears from his eyes had already mixed with the rain. Although Hayden in the photo is slightly different from when he was a child, and there is no specific information about the Navy, Robin can still be clearly identified. The person in the photo is the pervert who appeared out of thin air in her bathroom as a child. There is no reason, she just knows that the person in the photo is Hayden. Without time to think about other things, Robin continued to look down. However, reading the entire newspaper, which had been blurred by the rain at this time, caused more questions in Robin's heart. According to the newspaper report, Hayden joined the Navy, and Hayden actually went to the Great Root. He fought people on the island of the Great Root a few days ago. Under the Admiral of the Navy, the future great swordsman, and Hayden's current strength. Robin, who has lived alone at sea for so long, understands the meaning of the words reported in the newspaper. Even if she hasn't seen it with her own eyes, she still has a general idea in her mind. Questions about Hayden entangled in her mind. The last time Hayden I saw at that time, his expression, his words. Before he knew it, Robin had stopped here for a long time, the rain from the sky gradually subsided, and people began to appear in the town. Immediately, the exercised instinct made Robin hurriedly cleaned up his emotions, and easily tore off the page of the newspaper about Hayden and stuffed it into his chest, and began to set off toward the port. Since the question can't be answered, then go face to find someone to ask clearly. Since Hayden is on the Great Route, then go to the Great Route. Robin, who lives in the cracks at this moment, has a real goal. Chapter 53 Long Lost Navy Headquarters Previous chapter. Next chapter advertisement. After waking up to learn that there was a second personality in his body, Hayden felt as if something had been stuck in his throat, and felt quite uncomfortable in his heart. It just so happened that Teacher Zephyr called him. He immediately jumped into the cabin, fell in front of Teacher Zephyr, and entered his room with Zephyr behind him. After all, no matter how you read the report in the newspaper, you can't know the specific situation that happened after he was in a coma, and there was a person in front of him who had seen it with his own eyes and experienced it personally. Thinking of Hayden's actions became a little anxious. After entering the room, there is no fancy decoration in the spacious room. Sky-white walls, wooden floors, a large bed, a desk, a table lamp, and a chair are all the objects in the room. Zephyr was already sitting on the chair behind the desk, while Hayden stood upright at the desk and looked at Teacher Zephyr. No other feelings after waking up. Zephyr then asked Hayden, and at the same time he naturally remembered the affairs of Peach Island a few days ago. After all of them were carried back to the warship by Zephyr, Zephyr immediately woke up the ship doctor who had only been put into a coma and did not suffer other injuries, and then checked them all one by one. The rest of the people on the warship were fine. The situation was almost the same after being stunned by the Overlord domineering look. The 10 people on board were also in the same situation, except for Hayden, who seemed to have undergone special changes in his body just now. After being brought back to the ship by Zephyr, Hayden's appearance has also returned to his usual appearance. His hair has turned black, his eyes have returned to their normal colors, and the temperature of the white snow on the sleeves he has always held tightly has returned to normal. No more terrifying air conditioning. After a preliminary physical examination, the ship's doctor temporarily came to a conclusion about Hayden's current situation, but he fell into a coma because of excessive overdraft of his physical strength, and he should be able to recover in a few days. Hayden looked up subconsciously, pondered for a moment and replied, "Nothing, should?" If he didn't meet his virtual personality, the attention in his mind was always partly attracted by the virtual personality in his body, and his expression seemed a little absent. How can this make that imaginary personality come out? Does it have to be like the way before, and I can't hold it anymore, and the phantom personality comes out and blows me up? Just like Kurosaki Ichigo, if you can't hold it up, it will burst into a blur. But then how can I see him above? Apart from the skill tree and blade zen, I can only see the inaccessible ice and snow world and nothing else. Advertisement standing, Hayden's thoughts didn't know where they diverge. Hey! Zephyr called him back. Teacher Zephyr. The sound immediately stirred Hayden's body tightly. Do you remember what happened afterwards on Peach Island? Zephyr asked him immediately, and he was very aware of the unusual phenomenon that happened to Hayden at that time. It was not because of the power that Hayden suddenly burst out at that time, but the expression he had burst out at that time, the feeling that he couldn't explain it clearly, as if something that didn't belong to this world possessed him body. After hearing Teacher Zephyr's question, Hayden thought for a while and replied, I remember that we had completed the mission and returned to the warship with the target. Then when we got to the coast, a lightning bolt struck in front of us, and then the teacher you stand in front of me, and the rest of the matter is completely dark. I just learned about the rest from the newspaper they just brought. Looking at Hayden with a reminiscence on his face, Zephyr frowned after listening to his memory, not knowing what he was thinking. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. For a time, the two silently faced each other. After a while, Zephyr signaled, Okay, you can go out. When you arrive at the headquarters, remember to follow me to give a report. Yes. After a salute, Hayden walked out. Closing the hatch behind him, Hayden was a little bit painful. One of the things that annoyed him the most in the past year of sailing was that he had to report to him after each mission. Advertisement, wait. He suddenly thought of something, as if he had forgotten what happened after asking Teacher Zephyr, and whether Evikov was taken away by the dragon. Thinking of this, he turned around and looked at the hatch again, staring at the hatch for a while, thinking about it, as if none of these seemed to be important. Subsequently, "Oh my God," Hayden whispered while rubbing the back of his head, and walked towards his room, thinking, "It's better on the days when I exercised before. Eat, practice, eat, and sleep." A few more days passed. Under the speed of the Navy ship, Hayden and his crew finally returned to the Navy headquarters, Marine Fodder. This place has been the longest since coming to this world. As the warship gradually entered the crescent-shaped port, the familiarity in Hayden's heart became deeper and deeper. The days floating in the endless sea are really boring. This would suddenly see a very familiar place in front of him, which made the emotions in his heart fluctuate slightly. I don't know what the guys like Small are doing now, and where is Tina holding the little brother? Hayden can't help thinking in his head with his hands on the railing. Soon after the warship arrived in Hong Kong, Zephyr walked at the forefront of the team. Hayden followed Zephyr, and the group set foot on this naval fortress. Naval ports of people coming and going, ensign, lieutenant, sergeant, corporal, and other navies of all ranks can be seen. Advertisement Marines in basic uniforms, Navy in civilian clothes, generals in justice coats, plus naval artillery shells, musket ammunition, and various materials piled around. Even the huge crescent-shaped port seems a bit crowded all the time. However, the crowds without exception made way for Hayden and his party. The greetings to General Zephyr are endless, and Hayden, who is behind Teacher Zephyr, feels handsome whenever he sees this scene. It can almost be said that the surrounding navies have been trained under Teacher Zephyr, which is why they have this momentum. This is the aura of the boss, Hayden, who followed behind, thought to himself. Subsequently, when Zephyr led the group to the huge square in the middle of the fortress, he asked Hayden to stay and wait for him to report with him, and the rest immediately disbanded. However, this time the place for the report was changed to another place, because this time the mission was assigned by the Marshal of the Navy headquarters himself. Therefore, Zephyr and Hayden need to go to the office at the top of the huge fortress, which is the office of the Navy Commander in charge of the entire Navy, and the current Marshal of the Navy headquarters, Air. In order to pay attention to the cards, the Marshal's place was set up for the old, and to maintain the majesty of the Navy headquarters, it is not allowed to fly around the fortress, cannot directly step on it, must walk from the inside. After Zephyr told Hayden where he was going this time, standing on the square, Hayden, who was directly under the fortress, couldn't help but look up, so that he was almost leaning up into an iron bridge to see the full view of the fortress. Grandma is tall. Chapter 54 Unexpected Reunion. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. High, long, winding, tired, annoying. Hayden, who is walking behind Zephyr, can be summed up in 4 words: this trip to explore the interior of the huge fortress of the Navy headquarters. Arrived at the Admiral's office and finished the routine mission report. It seemed that Zephyr hadn't finished talking to the Marshal, so he asked Hayden to go out first, and by the way told him that he could rest for a few days after the mission was over. Hayden didn't care, and he left the door after answering. He was a little bit more concerned about the Admiral Kong, who had just met. This character, who has only appeared a few times in the original book, had taken the position of Marshal of the Navy a few decades before the beginning of the story of One Piece, as early as Carp, Roger One Piece, Whitebeard, and even Locke's time. From that period, he had the top combat power on the sea. Even now, because of the decline of age, even the decline of physical fitness has reduced the power. But some things in the body will not gradually fade with age, on the contrary, their own skills will become more refined. Not to mention, this big man seems to have not been taken away by time until the latest plot, and has even been promoted to the commander-in-chief of the whole army of the world government and command the 3 armies. However, the aura that Hayden and Marshal Kong gave him face to face just now, that kind of temperament. If Hayden didn't look at the thick muscle masses on his body like a tree trunk and the scars on his bare skin, he would think that this was just like an old man who just likes to exercise. He sat on the chair with Hayden high, and the Marine Marshal Kong did not give him the feeling of being a top-notch. Even if he perceives with ray pressure, the ray pressure of the Marine Marshal Kong is as calm as water. If Hayden didn't know the real situation, he would definitely think that this person was not a threat. The big guy should have reached the realm of returning to the basics, right? Lowered the brim of the hat, put his left hand on the handle of the white snow knife hanging from his waist, and stretched his right arm into the half-drawn navy jacket. Advertisement. As Hayden was thinking in his head, he didn't know how many steps he had descended and he hadn't reached the end. Since there is a holiday for a few days, I just go back and have a good sleep. Thinking about it this way, Hayden just passed the huge space inside the fort where they trained. There are always students on the playground. One group left, another group came, constantly replenishing the source of students. Hayden didn't want to look up, and walked silently with his head down. At this time, unexpected things happened. "Hey, Hayden," a familiar voice sounded here. Quincy Dalmesia, the same period of the new barracks, and later joined the companion of the General Zephyr elite camp, that is, the person who ate the cat fruit in the form of the jaguar. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. At this moment, he was shouting Hayden, who passed the road on one side of the field. "Hey, this way." He raised his hands and waved. He saw a man wearing a basic soldier uniform with a knife hanging from his waist and walking leisurely, thinking that it must be the guy Hayden. Huh? Hayden walked with his head down, wondering who was calling his name. Then he raised his head and looked in the direction where the sound just sounded. Among the exaggerated exercise programs of many elite camp students, Hayden locked down the crowd at the source of the sound and looked intently. The best friends he first met were standing on the field. Queedy, Smog, Duddy Mazdarson, Dick Rodney, and Tina, they all gathered together and stood together. "This situation is a bit strange." Then Tina's voice sounded, "Brother." Advertisement. At this time, Tina, who was 17 years old, was leaping her feet on the spot, waving her hands excitedly towards Hayden, looking very brave. The rest of the others all gestured to him with their own actions. The long and fluttering pink hair made Hayden's vision a little dazed, and he was lost in Tina's figure, thinking in his mind that they were all gathered. What is this scenario? Forcing his gaze away from Tina, Hayden walked towards them with a confused expression. As soon as he approached them, the excited Tina immediately rushed towards Hayden in a savage collision. The gentleman Hayden did not even think about it and dodged slightly. How can a man of 1.8 meters tall take advantage of a woman? Hayden's expression did not change, and he looked at the other four people. The four people standing in a row showed silent expressions, and the corners of their mouths twitched a little. Although Hayden and Tina often do this, they still can't help showing this expression whenever they see it. Subsequently, Small asked about Hayden's current situation and asked, "Hayden, I saw you in the newspaper, you should know it yourself." Speaking of them, a few of them haven't gathered together for several months. Everyone has their own tasks, or special exercises, and they always get together. Kuidi intervened in silence and said, "Kungbing's swordsman, he really deserves to be my opponent." He couldn't help but nodded. "Hayden, it's in the newspaper, how do you feel now?" Duddy and Dick asked hurriedly. Advertisement. All of them looked more or less excited. The youngest of them, Hayden, he started to be a little famous in the sea. Smog and the others asked him at the same time. Hayden didn't know how to answer them one by one. After thinking about it, he replied, General, small scene." He waved his hand to them to be low-key. Smog and the others heard Hayden's response, and as expected it was Hayden's original taste, and indifferently revealed a temperament that wanted people to beat him, and everyone laughed. Little brother, Tina, who rushed over, also rushed back, shouting, and threw herself on Hayden's back. The weight of a woman, Hayden almost staggered into a dog to eat shit, I rely on. While muttering in his mouth, his hands quickly grasped Tina's hands on his shoulders to maintain stability. The feeling coming from behind really made Hayden a little headache, and then he said bitterly, "Sister, how old are you, and you still play like this?" I thought back to myself, when I read comics before, Tina was not such a character. Smog and the others who were interrupted by Tina had to watch Tina continue to quarrel with Hayden, and the few of them had nothing to do with Tina and Hayden. I haven't seen Hayden for a few months, and seeing him, Tina, is like a chicken blood, laughing. He. "I am your boss, I can play whatever I want." She lay down, Hayden said in his left ear. The uncontrollable sensation of being blown around his ears made Hayden's body tremble. The awkward feeling made him want to shake Tina down, and after a few hard strokes, he shook her down. It's impossible for Tina to make trouble nearby, and it is impossible to say something, so Hayden decides to ignore her for the time being. "Why do you guys have time to gather here today?" Hayden asked the four Smogs standing in front of him. Chapter 55 Final Graduation Assessment Previous Chapter. Next chapter advertisement. Quincy Dalmesia is wearing a formal Navy uniform. A little thin cloth can't cover him, who has grown up and has stronger muscles. You can still notice his bulging muscles through his clothes. As a natural smoke fruit capable person, Smaller naturally learned to hold a cigar. Hayden had long forgotten when he suddenly noticed Smaller holding a cigar in his mouth, and he has never seen it since the way he doesn't smoke a cigar. Then, even though Duddy Mazdarson is relatively young, he has a strangely shaped beard at this moment, and he has a long sniper rifle on his back. Dick Rodney is a swordsman just like Hayden, except that he uses a double sword style, with two sabers hung on each side. As for Tina, she has long fluttering pink hair, her clothes seem to be underclothed, and her hands are wearing dark purple leather gloves. Each of them wore formal Navy uniforms and a complete set, as if something grand was about to happen next. This point deepens the doubt that Hayden wanted to ask a little bit, because it seems that there is nothing important to change into a formal uniform. Immediately, Smog, who took the lead, replied to Hayden. "We are going to apply for graduation together today, and this training camp has almost stayed long enough." The other four nodded to indicate that they were right. Graduation. Hearing this word, Hayden was taken aback, and the thoughts in his heart began to writhe. Correct. Also, it seems that it has been more than 4 years since I entered this training camp. Normally, I should have graduated long ago. I remember that when I first measured my bone age, I learned that I was about the same age. Since then, even though it has been more than 4 years, I am only about 13 or 14 years old. And Smog and the others are several years older than themselves, and they can no longer stay in this training camp, they must apply for graduation. Thinking of this, Hayden immediately changed his mind. Although his age can still be spent in this training camp for a few years, it seems that there is no need for it. Teacher Zephyr taught them everything that should be taught, and the Navy's 6th form has almost been learned. 1 year of going out to sea to catch pirates has also experienced enough, and the rest is up to my own understanding if I want to go further. Advertisement. Realizing that it has become difficult to increase her physical strength recently, Shu Baishui's understanding of the depth has also slowed down, and the situation of improving her strength has reached a bottleneck. Hayden thought about it in his mind for 2 seconds, and then said to Smog and them, "Give me one too." Small and others didn't understand Hayden's meaning too much. Hayden said quickly, "Admi, where do you want to apply for graduation?" Noting that Hayden didn't seem to be joking with them at the moment, Smaller replied, "Okay, then we will go together." This playground was not a good place to talk. Everyone immediately followed in Smog's footsteps and walked under his lead. Hey, should the graduation assessment be another old routine or fighting competition, right? No, why did you stand here just now? We are here to gather. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Hayden, Smog and others chatted about each other, and a group of 6 people went to Teacher ZFA's office to wait. If you want to apply for graduation from this training camp, you have to go through the process of the head of this training camp, Teacher Zephyr. According to the specific conditions of graduation assessment that Smog and others inquired, it seemed that the graduation assessment was changing every year, and there was no accurate reference. At this time, everyone standing outside the door had no idea, although at this moment the strength of each of the 6 of them basically reached the average level of graduation. Almost all of them had the strength of a major Navy headquarters or above. But if the gutter capsizes in this small graduation assessment, it would be so embarrassing. Thinking of this, everyone couldn't help feeling a little nervous. Before Teacher Zephyr returned to the office, everyone stood in front of the room and waited. After a while, the figure of Teacher Zephyr finally arrived. Advertisement, Hayden. Queedy. Seeing a few of them standing in front of the door guarding him, Zephyr was taken aback. "How do you guys stay here?" "Hayden, didn't you just say you can rest for a few days?" he asked. While asking, Zephyr opened the door of the office casually, walked in, and motioned for a few of them to come in and talk. Hearing Teacher Zephyr questioning him, Hayden immediately replied, "Teacher Zephyr, some of us are here to apply for graduation." "Yes, Teacher Zephyr." Small and the others followed in unison. Zephyr, who was sorting out some documents on the desk at the moment, had a pause, and then turned to look at Hayden. "Have you guys thought about it?" "I would think about it in my mind." Except for Kai Hayden's a little younger age, Smog, Kui D and others are strong enough to lead the team to sea on their own, and it's almost time to graduate. Since it was about the business of graduation, Zephyr stopped the tidying movement, sat in the chair, and looked at Hayden and the others. Regarding the graduation assessment, he must be responsible and explain to them in detail. Yeah. X6 The expressions of Hayden and others are extremely solemn. Well. After getting their answers, Zephyr began to explain to them one by one the situation of the graduation assessment. The situation of graduation assessment this year is still different from previous years. The assessment test is divided into 2 tests. The first test, this year we decided to put it on an uninhabited island on the Great Sea Route, named Tarataro Island. Its name is taken from the unique landforms of this island. There are 4 layers in total. Each layer is like a huge disc. The disc is the land on the island, where the plants and animals live. In the middle of the island, there is a huge pillar connecting the 4-layer disc, and the rising ocean current flows on the pillar for people to go up, like a water elevator. There are 4 floors on the island, and the climatic conditions on each floor are just for the 4 seasons of spring, summer, autumn and winter. Advertisement. And the condition you need to achieve is that each floor will have the most powerful beast in the entire floor, and you can pass this first test as long as you get to the 3rd floor. Having said that, Zephyr paused for a while, let Hayden and the others think about it in their minds. Hayden reacted for the second time. What kind of strange island is this? 4 stacked discs, each layer is different in season, and there is a boss. He didn't know where to complain. The expressions of Small and the others are not much better, but Small thinks of an important question. He asked, Teacher Zephyr, then this assessment is single or everyone? Zephagong wanted to talk about this. He said, you can do it alone or in a team. Oh. Then the second test, which is the last one, you have to independently annihilate a pirate with a bounty of over 100 million. At once. What? A bounty of more than 100 million yuan, you can only be alone? The second and last test requirements made Hayden and some of them couldn't help but exclaim. They who went out to the sea knew how difficult it is for a pirate with a bounty of more than 100 million yuan, not to mention asking them to do it themselves. People dealt with it. Zephyr didn't care that the words were interrupted, and continued. If you have all passed the assessment, we will determine your military rank after graduation based on your performance in the test. He listened to all the explanations of Teacher Zephyr without falling to the ground. Hayden was not afraid of hearing that he needed to annihilate the pirates with a bounty of over 100 million yuan alone, nor was he afraid of hearing about Tarataro Island. On the contrary, there was a bit of excitement in his heart, and he wanted to hurry up to meet the beginning of the assessment. Chapter 56 Like water previous chapter next chapter advertisement. Clear your mind, like water, flexible and invisible. Pour water into the cup and it will become the shape of the cup. Pour it into the bottle and it becomes the shape of the bottle. Pour it into a teapot and it becomes a teapot. Water can flow or hit fiercely, it's like water, my friend. Time flies, and now it has come around January 1508 in the Haiyuan calendar. After applying for the final graduation assessment with Smog and others, Teacher Zephyr gave them a period of time to prepare and test together with other students who also applied for the graduation assessment. At this moment, this time, the number of students who applied for the graduation assessment is a little bit more than before. Zephyr arranged for 2 warships to be dispatched, one for logistical work, and one for the more than 30 students who applied for graduation. At the same time, Zephyr also brought a few lieutenant generals with him, in order to prevent accidents during the voyage, and to rescue students in case of accidents on Tarataro Island. At this time, a fleet of 2 naval warships had left the port from the Navy headquarters and had been sailing on the sea for 4 or 5 days. It should not take long for the destination of Tarataro Island. In order to calm the excitement caused by the assessment that is about to take place, even if it is approaching that he will go to the island to fight next, Hayden still keeps on practicing. At this moment, Hayden was biting his sleeve Shirayuki with his teeth, shirtless his upper body, and using only 5 fingers to support his body doing handstand. But this alone is nothing. However, there is actually a thick black barbell with 10 T on each side on his feet, and this is not over yet. At this moment, Hayden was impressively propped with his hands on the naval gun protruding from the hull of the warship, and his eyes were looking straight at the rough sea below. The sea at this time is not calm and peaceful. Even the Navy warship he was sitting on was a huge monster braving the wind and waves. At this time, it was shaken by the tumbling sea. Hayden is now in a delicate state where he will fall into the sea if he is not careful. Advertisement. He meditated in his mind a famous saying that a famous person in the world said. I emptied my mind and became like water. Hayden swayed with the tossing waves, and by the way, he held the barbell with his feet doing handstands. Crazy, crazy. What kind of monster is the guy in this boat? Will he fall into the sea? Wouldn't the other people who boarded with him be the same monsters as him? Because the waves that set off sometimes hit the deck of the warship from time to time, making the ship wet everywhere, so the students who participated in the graduation examination with Hayden stayed in the cabin, and there were some remaining on the deck standing on their posts. Seaman sailor. They watched the guy doing exaggerated handstands on the naval gun and started talking in a low voice. They had never seen anyone doing exercises so weird. They have seen a barbell with a weight that they can't imagine, but they have never seen it in this way. With each wave of ups and downs, the person's body moved with it. His feet were always tightly grasping the barbell, and the inverted body had not shown any signs of falling. It was almost flat. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. They watched Hayden doing exercises. Their eyes widened involuntarily, and they were fascinated by them while they fell together. And the complicated thoughts will always remain in Hayden's mind, and after sweeping away, he slipped back directly without paying attention. Simply, Hayden closed his eyes just to take a look at his current ability situation. Then he kicked his feet hard. His body immediately returned to his right, grabbed the fallen barbell with his right hand, first placed the barbell on the deck casually, and then put the sleeve bishway back into the scabbard, then sat on the deck and closed eyes. At once, in his mind, an endless white space appeared, and he once again came to the inner skill tree space. Hayden immediately flew to the round platform of the skill tree, and his feet landed on it. Since knowing that he can train many things through himself, he has not been in the space of the skill tree for a long time. Advertisement first, he felt that he had enough means. As long as he continued to work hard, he would still be invincible. Second, after accumulating a wave of points to exchange for various skills last time, he decided to accumulate another wave of points to exchange in one go. Standing in front of the skill tree, Hayden just wanted to touch his hand to the skill tree and look at the lighted skills, but he noticed something that he didn't have before. Something was actually engraved on the bark of the skill tree. What is this? It didn't seem to be before, right? The curious Hayden muttered to himself following the inscribed marks. One vertical, 1 point, another vertical. Okay, isn't that what 1.1 means? Hayden exclaimed. Can your F*King system be upgraded? Thinking of this, Hayden immediately touched it, and the light curtain of the skill tree immediately appeared. Reaper, Quincy, and Void. The three branches are still only the part where the Reaper is lit. The unlit part above doubles because of the number of times that it is lit. The current value is slightly larger than the previous value. The upgraded skill tree has changed a little from the previous style. Hayden noticed that there was a lottery sign in the lower right corner and immediately clicked on it. At once, a big lottery turntable appeared, and all kinds of things appeared on it. Open black lens bracket blindfold close black lens bracket open black lens bracket killer stone close black lens bracket open black lens bracket meat tonic close black lens bracket open black lens bracket Superman medicine close black lens bracket headrest in hand open black lens bracket video bug close black lens bracket open black lens bracket cloak close black lens bracket advertisement open black lens bracket anti-spirit spray repellent X close black lens bracket. Remember to change the magic machine. Open black lens bracket Yihun Wan close black lens bracket. A total of 10 things were placed on the big turntable. These are all props in the God of Death. Hayden looked a little fascinated by the things on the turntable. Finally, this system seems to be used a bit. Hayden immediately read the description of each item one by one. But, you give me a head rest, what does the personal photo album of a big guy in Jingle Chunshui mean? There are only 10 things in total, and you also stuffed a photo album of the uncle with legs. At first sight, he was still thinking about the use of it, but he didn't expect it to be really useless. Hayden didn't know how to calm his breath.
His chest was a bit undulating, and he looked at the price of a prize draw. It takes 1,000 points to draw once, and it is written like this in the lower right corner of the turntable.
1,000 points. 100 points cost 10 million. Isn't this 100 million Baileys? Hayden counted silently and suddenly shouted. I used your monkey. Are you trying to count on my points? Hayden jumped right away, and he just saved up to a little more than 1,000 points again. This time, I will empty them all. At this moment, Hayden, who was very emotional, wanted to leave the skill tree space directly. But, Chapter 57 arrive at Tarodoro Island. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Remember to change the magic machine. He really wanted the divine change machine on the big turntable. This is a portable item carried by the god of death among the gods of death. It can be used to erase the memory of the opponent during a certain period of time and replace it with other memories, so as to prevent the person from knowing the truth of the matter. This item is most suitable for accidental exposure when sneaking around the dog, and the lucky draw items of this big turntable are not fixed for each draw, who knows how long the next time will be. Hayden stared at the divine change machine on the big turntable, pondering for a moment. Afterwards, his teeth bite and his heart was cruel. The accumulated points flowed away like water, and the lottery turntable turned slowly. Turn and turn, turn and turn. Hayden's mind also became a little trance following the rapid rotation of the turntable. Finally, the turntable stopped slowly. However, what the pointer points to is exactly, open black lens bracket blindfold close black lens bracket. I lost Lei Lu Mo. Hayden collapsed, he doesn't want to play anymore, refund the money. This eye mask is exactly the same eye mask worn by Mujian Ba in the Death God. It was developed by the 12th Division of the Gotei 13th Division and the Technology Development Bureau. The blindfold will always absorb the suppression consumption. People's spiritual pressure suppresses their own strength. To suppress his own strength, to make his opponent more advantageous, and to enjoy the fun of fighting, this thing is also a great weapon for pretending to be. Advertisement. However, Hayden hasn't disliked his spiritual pressure being too strong. Okay. Hayden looked at the black blindfold that appeared in the palm of his hand at this moment, with nothing to say. His expression was like eating shit, and then he put the blindfold into his pocket. At any rate, I spent 100 million Baileys to collect it, so it's better to collect it. Then, the aggrieved Hayden directly withdrew from the skill tree space. Hey, I wouldn't be optimistic if I knew it. After opening his eyes, Hayden was thinking about it. He was carrying a barbell on his shoulders and was about to put things back in the equipment room. At this moment, the sea seemed to be much calmer, there was no feeling of shaking on the boat, and the sky was brighter. As he walked, Hayden continued to think about the remaining abilities in his mind. The Navy 6 style shave has long been proficient, and he also cooperated with the principle of instant step to further improve the speed of movement. The iron block is poured into the refined body to make it reach the hardness of iron and become the body of steel. The defect of not being able to move freely when using the iron block is also overcome, that is, it is unable to exercise vigorously. The remaining several formulas also created more or less extended skills. It's that the return of life, extended from the 6 formulas, has not yet been learned. This is a terrifying trick to some extent, and Hayden has always wanted to learn it. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Thinking of this, Hayden couldn't help frowning, so he continued. Reaper's cut fist and ghosts had reached a certain level, and it was almost perfect. Then it was his own realm of kendo. Hayden himself divided into several stages. One is the swordsman stage. In simple terms, it means being able to pick up the sword and possessing sword skills to be called a swordsman. One is the swordsman stage, where you understand the profound meaning of cutting iron, and when you arrive, you can understand the breadth of all things, and you can have the power to cut iron. One is the sword tyrant stage. In simple terms, it means to be able to swing out of the body's sword energy and cut out the flying slash to be called a sword tyrant. Advertisement. Now Hayden can already be called a swordsman. But the title of the next great swordsman can't be called by himself. This must be really typed out in the sea, before others can add the title of great swordsman before the name. As for the road of the swordsman, Hayden, who had already placed the barbell, sat on the bench and couldn't help looking at the sleeve Shirayuki on his waist. Since the Zhanpakudao is a sword, it can definitely be entangled with domineering. It seems that after this graduation examination, you can learn domineering. In the past, due to age and physical fitness, Hayden did not rush to practice domineering, but now after graduation, he has to lead the team alone, and he wants to go to the new world after graduation, so he has the ability to domineering. It's necessary. As Hayden was thinking about his own business, at this time their fleet had arrived in the sea near Tarodoro Island. Feeling the stop of the warship under his feet, Hayden stopped thinking in his mind, opened the door and walked out. At this time, the warship at Hayden's feet that had boarded all the students who had taken the graduation examination stopped in the waters that were almost a few minutes away from the island. Standing on the second floor passage, Hayden glanced at it, and the shape of the Tarodoro Island was really magical. 1, 2, 3, 4 floors of land. The area of the island is a circle larger than that of the islands that you have usually seen. The highest level cannot see the situation above. The whole island seems to be strung together by huge pillars. You can roughly see the appearance of the first and second floors. The situation on the first and second floors is indeed as teacher Zephyr said. The first floor is all like a tropical rainforest, but it is a very ordinary island situation. However, the situation on the second layer is quite different. Facing the direction where their warship was at the moment, what Hayden saw was all colorful things, as if the second floor was all overgrown with all kinds of flowers. He was not sure what was going on. At this time, he only knew that this Taro Island did have something. Hayden looked at the deck again. The rest of the students who had applied for the graduation assessment were gathering on the deck below. He quickly walked down and stood in the line. At this time, more than 30 people stood in a square team, and teacher Zephyr was standing at the bow of the ship and looking at them. Behind you is the location of the first test of your graduation assessment. As long as you can reach the third floor and defeat the king of the beasts on the third floor, then you will be deemed to have passed the first test. Advertisement. Single or team, it's up to you to choose. However, I will decide your military rank after graduation based on your specific performance. Immediately, the team began to discuss. At this time, more than 30 people, including Hayden, Smog, Tina, and others, began to turn their minds. If you want to get a higher military rank when you graduate, you must choose to pass alone. However, you must also consider the dangerous situation on the island and the difficulty of the test. If you choose to pass the test alone, it is likely that the test will not be completed due to the difficulty of the test, and the graduation will fail. This is also a consideration. It was Hayden, who thought about it for a while and decided to clear the level by himself. This is not only a test for graduation assessment, but it also happens to know what kind of man you are now. If you lose here, then you are just this kind of degree. Although there is still an explosion that seems to be blurred. Zephyrong and the others thought in their hearts, paused for a moment, and continued. We will send you a signal bug. If you can't stand it on the island, you can use it, and then I and a few lieutenants will come. Support. But remember, if you use a signal bug, it means you have automatically given up this graduation. And the Navy who can't graduate in this training camp. I believe you should have heard of this kind of thing. Teacher Zephyr only spoke indifferently, but it caused a chill in the back of everyone. At this point, Zephyr's explanation is complete. Afterwards, the warship under her feet moved again, and after a short while, the warship slowly reached the coast of Tarodoro Island. The two warships were firmly anchored on the shore. The work on the logistics ship began to operate under the command of several lieutenants. On the other ship, more than 30 people, including Hayden, plus Zephyr, everyone so set foot on this Tarodoro Island. However, this time, a news bird that can always find people just flew over their heads and dropped a newspaper. Chapter 58 Perception Shrouded. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The location is on a very remote island on the Great Sea Route Tarodoro Island. But even so, newsbirds who sell newspapers can still find their exact location to deliver today's newspaper. The newspaper fell among the people standing on the edge of the tropical rainforest. There were more than 30 students, including Hayden, who were about to take the graduation assessment immediately. The atmosphere was suddenly interrupted by this newspaper. Zephyr didn't stop the students from following actions. The newspaper that had fallen was caught by a tall, thin student, and most of the eyes of the crowd immediately looked in his direction. Hayden, Tina, and others who stood together had the same idea. Then, everyone heard the man who caught the newspaper read aloud. Shocked. 500 million naval supernova. Recently, our agency finally collected basic information about the Navy involved in the Kamabaka Kingdom incident reported by the agency last time. I was brought into the Navy by the well-known Lieutenant General Kuzan and the natural frozen fruit ability in the Navy when I was a child. I have been trained in the Navy since I was a child. In the process, he also demonstrated the same freezing ability that is not natural. Quote. The news from the special channel of Guor News Agency. This Navy named Hayden showed the potential of a great swordsman not long after he joined the Navy. Teaching. A portrait photo of Hayden.jpg. And many more. The thin and tall man who read the newspaper stopped reading here, and then looked in Hayden's direction. Isn't Hayden the Hayden over there? Advertisement. As soon as Hayden heard his name, he knew that the one above should be himself. This name seemed to have no style in One Piece. However, he didn't care about going to the newspaper. He just didn't expect the intelligence source of this newspaper to be so powerful. There is also the circumflex and frustration of how you read the newspaper. Hayden didn't mean to speak. But Tina next to him was a little excited when she heard the report about Hayden in the newspaper, as if she was in the newspaper. As for Smog and others, there was no expression on their faces at this time. Although the appearance of the tropical rainforest next to them was no different from the usual ones, there was a strange feeling in their hearts. Among the more than 30 students, those who were familiar with Hayden couldn't help but turn their gazes to Hayden's side. But one of the gazes and the other gaze revealed different meanings, as if staring at Hayden's figure, red light appeared in his eyes. Only after the person holding the newspaper paused for a while, he resumed reading. In the past year, from his first patrolling mission with General Zephyr to the present, according to our agency's rough estimation, he has captured a total of 500 million pirates with a bounty. So it's not an exaggeration to call this Navy the new generation of naval supernova. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. After reading this, even if the report on the front page of the newspaper is finished, the person holding the newspaper will pass it on to other people to read it. Immediately, the emotions in everyone's hearts have undergone different changes. Unexpectedly, this guy is the most famous among them. Everyone is in the same training camp, and his own strength is not much worse than that of him. This newspaper actually returned his front page. At this time, Teacher Zephyr, who was standing in front of them, interrupted their discussion and motioned to hand over the newspaper. After receiving the newspaper, he said loudly, "The assessment will begin immediately. You must form a team to stand together. If you don't form a team, stand away." Advertisement. Hearing this question, Hayden subconsciously looked at Small and the others, but noticed that Small and the others had already made a choice, even Tina. Small, Tina, Kuidi, Duddy, and Dick, all 5 of them chose to be assessed on their own. Immediately Hayden and the others exchanged glances, and each nodded silently, looking serious. Hayden glanced at the sleeve Baishui pinned to his waist. At this moment, besides excitement, there was still a little nervousness in his heart. After a while, only a few of the trainees who participated in the assessment chose to form a team, and most of them chose to participate in the assessment alone. Seeing their choice, Zephyr didn't have any thoughts, and immediately looked at the adjutant standing next to him and motioned. The adjutant who was holding a watch next to him immediately added loudly, "There is a 3-day time limit for this assessment." When it came to this, he dragged a little bit and held up the watch in his hand. Suddenly, "Start now." However, at this moment, most of the students are already prepared, and understand what consciousness this high watch is. At once, the swish swish voice immediately sounded. In this dense and tall rainforest, various insects and beasts roared unevenly. In this environment with a temperature of at least 35 degrees, the forest scenery is a bit distorted. In the blink of an eye, most of the students scattered and rushed directly into the rainforest, disappearing. As for Teacher Zephyr, they have already gone to the logistic warship and walked into the monitoring cabin on the ship. There are no roads and no sun in the rain forest, but there are strange animals and plants. Crisis is also everywhere. It is very likely that just ant-sized things can directly kill you. In order to avoid most of the dangers, Smog directly turned into smoke and sprayed high into the sky, over the towering trees of the forest, and rushed into the forest from the sky. Advertisement. As for Kuidi, Duddy, Dick, and Tina, they didn't have much choice. Although they had moonsteps that could be trampled on, the range of the island was huge, and the island was not only one level. In order to save energy as much as possible, they can only plunge head-on into this unknown territory, splitting 4 different directions and rushing directly inside. The last Hayden, he didn't rush in a hurry. Although he hadn't learned how to see and be domineering, his own spiritual pressure perception was also useful. Hayden looked strangely at the only team beside him that hadn't entered. In the middle of the team was a guy with a cone-shaped upper body. The hair in the middle of his head seemed to be a little sparse. His facial features, Hayden, seemed to be familiar, but he didn't know who it was, and he was still a swordsman of second hand. As if realizing that he was looking at him, the man stared back, but, how could there be a strange feeling in his eyes? Hayden couldn't speak of this meeting either, so he withdrew his gaze, and then stopped thinking about it. Follow closely. Hayden closed his eyes, and used his Reiki perception to feel the situation of the beasts on the island, their distribution, their strength, and the most important thing is where the most powerful guy on the first layer is. Since it is a guy used by the Navy for graduation assessment, its Reiatsu will definitely be very conspicuous. Suddenly, perception spreads rapidly like a dome with Hayden as the center but invisible. The information of all living creatures covered by perception is immediately fed back into his brain, and countless large and small Reiki light spots are instantly presented in the brain. This huge flow of information did not disturb Hayden's brain, and he was also filtering out the familiar spiritual pressure at the same time. Tina, Smog, and the Reiatsu of that Bedwell guy. In the end, it was the unusually eye-catching strange Reiatsu. Chapter 59. Crop Circles. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. It goes fast in just a few tens of seconds. In this moment, Hayden's reinforced sense has enveloped all areas on the first floor of Taro Taro Island. And after he filtered out all the familiar and unfamiliar rain pressure, he sensed that there was an unusually strong rain pressure in the direction of 1 o'clock where he was now facing, about 40 to 50 kilometers away. This time, there is no need to think about it anymore. Hayden directly used moon steps to fly in that direction. Get rid of the boss in one go, and then ascend to the second floor from the eye-catching giant cylinder. At this moment, the people who gathered together on the coast before, after the order of the start of the assessment, were only left on the bank with the person and his team that Hayden had found strange just now. After noticing that there were no more people around this club, the second swordsman with thin hair revealed his true expression. He controlled the emotions in his heart with all his strength, and subconsciously clenched the handle of the saber tightly, as if he hadn't exercised for a long time and was a little fat body shaking uncontrollably, staring at the direction Hayden stepped up into the sky, his eyes burning an inexplicable flame. This makes Hayden a little familiar with Ramen Gumir, the opponent he had defeated for the first time before, and the guy that Hayden taught him to shave afterwards. However, since the game was over, Hayden somehow forgot about this person, and then he directly joined Zepha's training camp. And Ramen Gumir, who was eliminated in the first round, naturally couldn't enter this training camp. I wanted to find Hayden, but I couldn't see Shanghai Deng for various reasons. Advertisement. At first, he didn't deal with Hayden, then Hayden defeated him, and he changed to Hayden's side, and then Hayden forgot about him. This way, over time, Ramen's sentiment towards Hayden gradually turned into hatred. At the same time, the first time he saw the report about Hayden, he was very popular. He tore the newspaper to pieces. The newspaper that came just now, he actually appeared on the front page. And when he was facing each other just now, he didn't even recognize himself. Hearing the news that Hayden wanted to graduate this time, Ramen, who knew he hadn't reached the graduation strength, also came to participate in the graduation assessment. No reason, just to prevent Hayden from graduating smoothly. Thinking of this, Ramen couldn't help touching the 2 tubes of reagents in the inner pocket of his clothes. These were the most important props he used to entrap Hayden. Immediately, Ramen no longer thought about it, and immediately rushed to the location he knew in advance. To be on the safe side, he was followed by two students who had spent a lot of money to let them team up with him. After all, he knew that he was still a little closer to graduation, and in order to make Hayden unable to graduate and let himself end up like him, Ramen was not so stupid to try and fail to graduate. Opening parenthesis. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi and then look at Hayden. He flew over the forest with moon steps for a short while. At this time, there was a variety of noises around, and from time to time, smoke and dust from the collapse of trees rose. It seems that someone else touched something. Hayden thought silently in his heart, because in his previous Reiatsu perception, this island is not just the boss that clears the level. Then he noticed a strange place in the forest slightly below, and he subconsciously stopped, stood in the air and looked down. Through the hot air, you can see that there was still a green ocean with no cracks just now, and a strange phenomenon was revealed below it. Advertisement. The Cropfield Circle appeared in the forest below. It's like the kind of pattern that is rumored to be drawn by aliens in the wheat field in the city, but here is a huge pattern drawn with dense forest. A slender line was drawn to expose the color of the ground, and it appeared below. Hayden sensed in his mind how far the other people were from the beast that cleared the level, and immediately got feedback that none of them had approached that place. At this time, Hayden, who was suddenly interested, thought for a while, and then directly aimed at the Cropfield Circle, and fell into a free fall. After igniting a slight smoke and dust, Hayden landed steadily on the pattern of the Cropfield Circle. He just landed on a raised mound, and immediately noticed his surroundings at the moment. The ground under my feet is as if it has been plowed over by some giant farming machine. The depth of the ravine is not a smooth ground at all. The soil is all turned over, and it is mixed with giant trees in the forest. It turns out that there are still numbers on this piece of land, but they were destroyed by something. Hayden couldn't help but knelt down and picked up a piece of tree trunk wreckage, thinking to himself. Moreover, on both sides of the road that was extended by something, the trunks on both sides also had traces of being cut by something sharp. After seeing this, Hayden couldn't help looking at the traces left by this terrifying creature, silently calculating its size in his heart. The road expanded by it has a width of about 20 meters, plus the range of motion seen from the sky just now. This thing is probably made by the strongest guy on the island. Hayden, who couldn't help but frown, thought of something in his mind. Tina can't deal with this kind of beast. Shocked by the shock, Hayden immediately lifted into the air, and at the same time sensed Tina's specific location with reinforcement. I rely on. However, Tina's spiritual pressure appeared in the area where the creature was staying. With Tina's current traveling speed, she might be able to touch the creature in just 5 or 6 minutes. Advertisement. Then, in the monitoring room on board the logistics warship on the coast, Zephyr and the other lieutenants could see that the figure of Shanghai Deng on the screen turned into a meteor and shot in one direction. Teacher Zephyr, this student. One of the lieutenants couldn't believe what he had just seen. Is this what the newspaper said about the new generation of naval supernova? Another lieutenant general couldn't help asking. Even if they had read Hayden's files, they didn't expect this student to be so fast, as if they were moving in an instant. Huh. This kid, Zephyr, who was always staring at the screen, did not answer his subordinate's question, and murmured to himself with a cold snort. Then, in his heart, he remembered the newspaper that he had just sent. Hayden's report actually made it to the front page of their newspaper. If this goes on, the name of Hayden will be spread more widely in the sea, and it will be marked by the Navy. Zephyr recalled the real situation that Kuzan told him about Hayden before, if that happened one day. Judging from the current growth rate of Hayden's strength, not only the reputation of the Navy, but it is also likely to be truly backlashed. At this moment, Zephyr's emotions are very complicated and tangled. Because he knew Hayden, this kid, although occasionally there will be some children's actions, but he has been moving towards the word justice, and there is no trace of fear in the process of capturing the pirate. Many lives have been protected in his hands. Staring at the picture on the screen, Zephyr, who put his hands on his chest, fell into deep thought. Chapter 60 Beast Wheel. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Even if you are flying over the forest, the view of the sea at this time is still like the endless green forest of the sea. The scenery in the surrounding line of sight immediately blurred, and the roaring wind blew across his body, and the navy uniform he was wearing was also squeaked against his body. In this boundless forest, occasionally some students were just below Hayden's flight path, subconsciously raised their heads but saw nothing, only a white line above them was gradually dissipating. The navy hat he was wearing had already been blown off by the wind after Hayden's sudden acceleration, revealing his hairstyle with a big back. Hayden was breaking through all the obstacles and flew straight to the unusual spiritual pressure he felt. Not for a while. Getting closer and closer to the abnormal spiritual pressure, Hayden noticed that in the line of sight in front of him, an explosion of smoke rose up from the forest below, accompanied by a bang. Someone must have run into this. Worried, Hayden once again determined the location of Tina's reinforcement, which would be somehow. His perception of reinforcement seemed a little confused, but he still got her approximate location immediately. It's not the place where the battle takes place. Okay. Thinking of this, Hayden increased his speed again, and in the next second, he reached the place where the smoke and dust had just risen. Hayden was not in a hurry, because at this moment, the whole situation was covered by thick smoke and dust. The boundless forest was lost in a large circle below. The rumbling from below has never stopped, and it seems that because of this huge movement, the rest of the students participating in the assessment have noticed this situation, and at this moment all have increased their speed and rushed towards this place. Advertisement. At the same time, because they all increased their aura at the same time, Hayden's perception seemed a little confused at this moment. The reiatsu of the students who participated in the assessment and the reiatsu of the other beasts on the island seemed to be mixed together. Fortunately, Hayden would be very close to the final place below, and after getting close, he could roughly distinguish the spiritual pressure below. There are a few familiar spirits at the bottom that are fighting against the abnormal spirits. Below are the guys he knows before, but they are not very familiar. The other people in the perception seemed to be getting closer and closer, and Hayden didn't intend to continue to observe the situation in the air, so he flew straight down, breaking through the layers of smoke. Then, at first glance, he saw something that looked like ivory, but it was magnified how many times. Boom. His sight was affected by the smoke and dust. Before Hayden had time to understand what was going on, he was flew out by the huge ivory. Fortunately, he drew out his sleeve Shirayuki in time to block him, resisting the impact of the unknown creature's attack. During the inverted flight, the smoke was also dissipated by this knock-to-fly movement. Immediately afterwards, Hayden saw the scene that had been shrinking in front of his eyes because of the inverted flight. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. The huge ivory that hit him was dancing wanton, and from the smoke that gradually spread and disappeared, the huge ivory growing on a certain kind of creature began to appear in ghosts. 1.2, 3. Immediately afterwards, they appeared in rows, swinging like a snake. That's not a ghost. Just now, because of an unexpected attack, Hayden's back-stroked hair somewhat blocked his vision, but this would stop the inverted flight trend. After he stopped in midair, he fixed his hairstyle and understood what he had just seen. What? As the unknown creature continued to attack in other directions, its actions directly cleared the thick smoke in the field at this moment, revealing its true colors. Advertisement. The whole body has snow-white hair, sharp teeth and claws, and the muscles on the body are well developed. What pierced from its back and spine is the thing that attacked him just now. The spikes are more exaggerated than the shape of ivory, and more terrifying, and the spikes extended to its long tail. In the size of this beast, Hayden estimates that it is almost half the size of a multi-point warship, and its overall shape is a bit like a combination of a tiger and a hedgehog. At this moment, the place where they are standing is the site cleared by this beast, and the traces left are the same as the situation in the place that Hayden checked first. When Hayden was accidentally attacked while observing the situation of this beast, Hayden immediately named the beast Thorn Tiger, and it would have the next move. The huge figure jumped up high, and suddenly the whole body curled up into a circle and quickly revolved. It smashed the ground with a boom, and the solid ground was broken open immediately, and all the soil was quickly splattered by it, and then it moved towards the field like a driving wheel. People in navy uniforms crushed past. By. The movement of the thorn tiger directly caused the earth under Hayden to tremble, and he could feel shocked even while standing in the air. It's one thing to be a giant sea king on the sea, and it was the first time Hayden encountered such a ferocious beast on this land. The thorny tiger's faster and faster rotation speed intensified its destructive power. At this moment, it became almost like a chainsaw. Anything that stood in front of it was cut away, whether it was a boulder or a tree. Naturally, the students in the field didn't dare to head on, and dodged around the field after shaved. Suddenly, the area that had been cleared by the thorns tiger became wider and worse. There were huge shattered trees and unformed ground everywhere. Hayden, who was observing the situation from the side, watched that the few people in the field hadn't gotten a solution to it, and it seemed that a guy was about to be touched by it. At the same time, noting that the rest of the people are almost here, Hayden sighed and shook his head. He still has to do it himself. In the blink of an eye, the instant step starts. Hayden's figure flashed directly in front of the student who was about to die under the attack of the thorn tiger, blocking him and the thorn tiger. Advertisement. Hayden. A slightly trembling voice came from behind Hayden, and there seemed to be a hint of hope in the desperate meaning. Staring at the giant chainsaw that was about to squash him in the next second, Hayden didn't look back, and said lightly, "Get out of here." However, the voice just fell. Clang. A huge noise like a sword strike suddenly exploded in the air. The swift response Hayden raised his sleeve with Shirayuki in front of him, blocking the attack of the Thorns tiger, and instantly stopped the rapid rotation of the Thorns tiger, but he only sank his feet slightly under the standing ground. Immediately afterwards, at the point where the blade of the sleeve Baishui touched the spikes on the back of the Thorns tiger, a shock wave erupted and spread, and immediately swept the surrounding area, shaking the dense branches and leaves in the rainforest with a rubbing sound. As for the student behind Hayden, because hiding behind Hayden had no effect, but seeing this scene before him, his eyes widened and his brain went blank. "Hey, get out of here quickly." Hayden felt that the person behind him hadn't left yet, and hurriedly urged. Immediately after awakening the sluggish person, he left here without saying a word. However, the thorn tiger who was stopped was also a little shocked because there was a little trick that could withstand him. Now, the people who got in the way on the field have been consciously let go of the field by Hayden just now. Hayden still maintained a defensive posture, staring at the body of the beast in front of him at the moment. There was not the slightest wave in his heart. Chapter 61 of Nail Destruction. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. One person with one sword fought against a giant beast that was at least 4 or 5 stories tall. He may not have the thorn-high Hayden on the back of this monster, but he easily stopped the offensive of this giant beast, staring at the first-level beast king who was in front of him at this moment. Then, the beast that was stopped by Hayden with a knife slowly raised its head, revealing its face. The eyeballs that can put Hayden's whole person in, its eyes seemed to give Hayden a strange feeling at this moment. It seems to be human. The huge nostril under the eyeball breathed a terrifying smell, and then slowly opened the mouth of the blood basin. Wow! Suddenly, Hayden felt up close what it was like the roar of the beast. Putting aside the deafening voice, his grandmother's legs, its saliva directly washed Hayden's face. The evasive Hayden hurriedly withdrew from it, and several dodged back to a safe distance. He hurriedly resisted the nausea and wiped his face clean with the jacket he took off. After wiping it, he simply threw the jacket away, wearing only short sleeves. M.D. Hayden, who was holding the sleeve Baishui in his right hand, then looked back at the direction of the monster, but saw the monster as if he understood what it did just now, and as if it just wanted to do so. He actually laughed. "I rely on." Then Hayden immediately remembered that there seemed to be some strong beasts in One Piece who could understand humanity. Thinking of this, he immediately became furious. "You did it on purpose." Hayden didn't plan to play with it anymore, holding the knife and rushed directly. Open corner bracket nailing x3. Advertisement. Haha. Almost 3 lines of the same angle, the same power, and the same time, the flying slashes slammed straight into the face of the Thorns tiger. This is a move that Hayden learned from the protagonist's tricks in The Food Captive and used it in order to increase the power of the slash without liberating Shirayuki. However, the target Hayden was attacking was not stupid. After attacking from the small point in front of him, he immediately felt how dangerous the sword chi from flying was, and he didn't choose to resist. However, the speed at which it dodges is still slightly slower. The way its 4 feet landed on the ground evaded to the right, but the long tail swinging behind it could not keep up. All the spikes on the tail were cut off by this move, leaving a neat and smooth cut. The thorny tiger that dodges was suddenly shocked, and the fear that hadn't appeared for a long time occupied its brain. Because it knows that if it took one step at night just now, its entire tail would be cut off. At this moment, the rest of the students have also arrived here. They all saw Hayden's slash just now, and they couldn't help stopping at the periphery of the field. This slash, Hayden's strength has actually increased again. At the same time, in the monitoring room on the logistics ship, Zephyr and Lieutenant General were also watching the showdown. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Although the conditions for the assessment this time are to get through the 3-tier bosses, although Zephyr and the others began to let them choose to form a team or a single player, they did not limit the changes on the way. In the end, the beasts they are going to hit are not something that can be solved by themselves alone. Regarding team combat, their cooperation is also very important. So whether you solve it alone or what else, all these are evaluated by Zephyr and the others after a few observations. However, at this time, the students surrounding the outer circle of the field didn't have the idea of going forward to join the battle. They each had their own cautious thinking about waiting for Hayden to consume some of this beast's physical strength before watching. As for Smog and the others, they were all within their sights, and they exchanged their eyes and did not move. The reason was because they knew that Hayden didn't like someone to get into his fight very much. At this time, he swung the nail cut but noticed that he hadn't hit the beast. Hayden's pace did not stop, and he continued to rush towards the Thorns tiger who had changed positions. Advertisement. Swish, another 2 flying slashes cut out. The Thorn tiger immediately became angry after the fear subsided. You ain't actually cut off my proud tail Thorn. Suddenly, looking at the sword aura coming forward again, the Thorns tiger suddenly exhaled a big breath from his nose, and his limbs suddenly leapt into the air. After avoiding the sword energy that Hayden slashed again, the tail behind him slammed at Hayden on the ground below. Whoosh whoosh. Immediately, only half of the spikes from the tail that were cut off by Hayden shot at him. Seeing this scene, Hayden did not panic and did not dodge. In the blink of an eye, he stepped directly into the air in the direction of the Thorn tiger in the air, and at the same time, Shirayuki's sleeve in his hand cut open any attacks on his body. But the Thorn tiger's tail thorns seemed endless, and they hit Hayden like a torrential rain. At the moment of the smash, the ground rumbling, smoke and dust everywhere. At the same time, Hayden also used its attack, stepping on it and rushing towards the Thorn tiger, which was already in the downward trend. 1 second, 2 seconds. After that, the Thorn tiger's attack had run out of ammunition. And now in the space between it and Hayden, there are no obstacles, and the falling Thorn tiger is now like an immovable living target. In an instant, Hayden rushed to the front of Thorn tiger, ready to strike his final blow. At this moment, the time within the range of one person and one beast seemed to slow down, and Hayden could even see clearly what the beast in front of him was saying. But, rest in peace, the expressionless Hayden said silently in his heart. Advertisement. Open corner bracket nailing X6. The slash that was twice as powerful as the previous slash cut out mercilessly. ... However, what Hayden didn't expect was that this thorny tiger actually reacted. It directly switched to the chainsaw form again, and the beast's body spun in midair at extreme speed. Nail Chop issued a dazzling spark on its rotating body, accompanied by a roar, and then the Thorn tiger was directly knocked out by Hayden. Damn me. Hayden, who was hovering in the air, didn't believe what he saw just now. The power of the move he had just didn't cut this thing. This thorny tiger also blocked my slash with its trick of rolling wheels. The puzzled Hayden watched the trajectory of the beast being knocked out, and directly chased it up. And the other students who watched underneath their battle, when they saw this situation, they all followed the direction that the thing flew out. As for the surveillance room on the logistics ship, the surveillance personnel quickly switched their perspectives to find the surveillance phone worm in that area. The puzzled Hayden naturally accelerated the speed of his flight, and within a few seconds he reached the landing point of the thorny tiger that had been knocked over. Its huge size smashed into a clearing directly in the forest. After the smoke cleared, Hayden stepped forward without hesitation, wanting to check the situation of the beast and confirm the details. The next thing that catches your eyes is this huge beast, 4 or 5 stories high, lost consciousness and collapsed on the ground. The unclosed eyelids showed large whites of eyes, and thick blood flowed out of the huge nostrils. As for the contact point of Hayden's slash behind it, at this moment it is already lying in a pool of blood. Chapter 62 Red Heart Engine 1.2. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The time at this moment is going backwards slightly. He came to what happened on the other side of Taro Island at the same time when Hayden was flying to the location of the Thorn Tiger. Among all the trainees who participated in the assessment on the coast before, the last 3 trainees who entered the forest, Ramen Gumir and the trainees he hired with money. Different from the way the other students chose to travel, the 3 of Ramen did not look around in the forest, but chose one direction and moved straight in that direction. That's because Ramen obtained general information on the first and second floors of the island through special channels. In the area on the first and second floors, what kind of beast site is in the area on the first and second floors, and there are deadly plants in that place. Etc. etc. After all, the island did not know the specific period when it was discovered and controlled by the Navy. The island was basically full of telephone worms for surveillance, and the specific conditions of the island could be learned from the remote end in real time, so as to observe and evaluate in detail. Trainees. But it is precisely because of this that under the surveillance of the surveillance phone worm, Ramen wants to do something bad, which also means that he must avoid the staff in the surveillance room and avoid the surveillance phone worm. After a full-fledged straight attack, the 3 of Ramen and the others finally rushed to the other side of their warship on the island, facing the coast. At this moment, they had already crossed the entire layer, just in time for Hayden to clean up the most powerful beast of this layer. Standing on the shore of this place, behind him stood 2 paid bodyguards. Ramen stared at his slowly raised right fist. He couldn't help but smile with a dark smile on his face, even with his ball-like bodyguard. Body shape. The flesh on his body trembles. Then he opened his palm, revealing the tube of red potion in his palm that was opened at this time, and there was less than a full dose of the red potion left. Open black lens bracket Red Heart Engine 1.2 Close black lens bracket. This is a special potion that is only used on ferocious beasts. No one knows who created it. Advertisement. After it is opened, it will naturally spread into the nearby air, and it can last for about 5 minutes. As long as the beast smells this thing, there will be changes in its body immediately, and the reaction time for the effect of the medicine to enter the body takes only 5 or 6 seconds. The specific function of this Red Heart Engine is that after inhaled from the nasal cavity, it immediately accelerates the beating speed of the heart, accelerates the blood circulation throughout the body, and squeezes out the power beyond the limit state to emerge. Attack power, destructive power, speed, etc. all-round instant increase. However, it naturally has side effects. After entering this state of increase, the beast is relatively less sane and will become mad. You can see the external performance from the eyes of the subject immediately congested. However, such a tube of explosive seeds, obtained by Ramen from the black market, was just released from one end of the island to the other. What's more terrifying is the turbulent aura caused by the collision between the students on the previous road and the beasts that are not the thorny tigers. What's worse is that the thorny tiger has created a large range of air shocks. All these factors are added together. As a result, the red engine spread to the entire area. And apart from the Thorns tiger who had been defeated by Hayden at this moment, there were countless beasts in the area of the first layer. From the place where Ramen first started to walk, the beasts in that area had sucked into the red engine and went into a frenzy. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. The beast that enters the violent state, it will also find the loudest, most noisy, and most attractive place in the area based on its perception. In other words, the most dynamic place on the first floor at this moment is the area where the Thorns tiger fell. It can be said that almost all the students participating in the assessment have gathered there. What hasn't been there yet is that they are enough to transform into a herd of beasts. Ramen looked at the empty test tube in his palm, and threw it into the sea nearby. Coincidentally, at this time, the ground under my feet began to vibrate, and at the same time, the branches and leaves of the forest in front of me were swayed, and the leaves fell. Advertisement. It started. After the brief shock caused by Hayden's move, the continuous shock that Ramen felt immediately followed, which meant that the red engine had begun to take effect. At first it was just 1, then 2, then 3. Incessantly, the frantic beasts began to slowly unite in groups as they rushed towards Hayden and the others. The giant tree was smashed and the ground was trampled on. Anything that stood in the way of the beast wave was simply vulnerable and could not play a blocking role at all. Either screaming, or shaking the earth, this is a general trend that is gathered and crushed against Hayden and the others. At this moment, Hayden and the others, who were scattered in the unconscious thorn tiger area, of course immediately noticed this abnormal phenomenon. No one can ignore the magnitude of this world's shock. Standing next to the unconscious thorn tiger, after perceiving this strange phenomenon, it was as if someone had suddenly pinched his heart. Hayden frowned and immediately turned on Reiki sensation, and suddenly opened the sensing domain. Tina, Smoj and others have other students. Then. WDNM. The distance was close. Hayden instantly perceived Tina and the others nearby, and then in the world of his perception, he saw things he hadn't even thought of. The small and large light spots in the perception are all superimposed together, as if the rest of the beasts on the island are all gathered together, surrounding them, everywhere. In other words, they caused this movement. Advertisement. Hayden looked up at the direction above the forest. From time to time, a flock of birds was taken off by surprise, and he fell silent for an instant. At the same time, the surveillance room of the logistics ship, Zephyr and others, who never left the monitoring room because of the critical moment, watched the screen suddenly go dark, and they were surprised, but then they saw the beast tied in the picture returned from a phone worm that survived happening. Immediately, the operators in the monitoring room froze, and even Zephyr and several lieutenants looked a little stiff. What happened suddenly on this island? Teacher Zephyr, let's get to the island quickly. It's probably too late if you don't leave. It is difficult to predict what the consequences will be, and the images envisaged after this made the lieutenant generals immediately become anxious. Zephyr remained silent. He looked at the screen pointed at Hayden's phone worm and noticed Hayden's expression. He was aware of the next situation, but he didn't want to use the signal worm. However, Zephyr couldn't let his students be buried in this aberrant wave of beasts. As you can see from the screen alone, the beast tide is called the beast tide because of the number of them gathered together. Obviously, this situation is obviously not a situation that can be solved by their dozens of ungraded naval imps. Up. Go. Zephyr threw off the justice coat behind him and said. Chapter 63 Long Live the King. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. At this moment this scene. As time flows away little by little. Overlooking the entire area from the first floor of Taro Island in midair, you will see a large circle formed by sand and dust, which is gradually shrinking from the edge of the first floor. At this time, Ramen Gumir and his 2 thugs, who were outside this circle, naturally lived in a safe area and would not be attacked by the beast wave. After the tide of beasts is crushed, Ramen will take his thugs towards the center and set off towards the giant column that is ascending to the second floor. Of course, Ramen used the red engine to create a wave of beasts, but Ramen didn't really want to kill all the other students participating in the assessment. If this is the case, not only is he going to sit in the city, but his father and his whole family are going to sit. The medicinal effect of the red engine will not last for a long time. The difficulty of this beast wave is that their number is very tricky, and the momentum it makes will be very large. If you don't know the real situation, it is likely to be I want to directly use the signal worm to abstain. No matter how bad they are, they can hide in the air even if they all know how to walk, and teacher Zephyr, who saw this situation, might also rush to the island directly. In addition, after the effects of the red engine, not only in the air, but also in the body of the beast, it is difficult to detect the specific situation, preventing Ramen from being exposed afterwards. As for why I chose to use the red engine approach, the reason is that Ramen Gumir knows Hayden's fighting habits very well, and he might choose to fight head-on with the beasts in order to protect the group of Tina. At the same time, he has the habit of hitting the head. If this happens, Hayden will be rescued by the cigar guy after being unable to carry it, and then Hayden will be judged to have failed the assessment because of being rescued by other students. Feeling the constant vibration under his feet, Ramen thinking of here suddenly felt ascended to the clouds in his mind. And even if Hayden didn't know how to find a way to resolve this crisis, then he would definitely consume most of his stamina because of resisting the animal tide. With 2 more levels to pass, Ramen absolutely does not believe that Hayden can pass this test. On the other side, Zephyr and others had already stepped on the logistics ship and headed straight to Hayden's direction. Under the proficient moon step, they were already rushing there quickly while moving at high speed, but they were still on their way to get there at the moment. The last is the area centered on Hayden. Advertisement. After a moment of silence, Hayden made a decision immediately. Hey, all gather towards me, he roared with all the strength of his whole body, indicating to the rest of the students who were surrounding him at this moment. The emergency alarm sounded in his mind because of the beast tide had clearly told him. The next situation is no joke. At once, the instinctive alarm sounded also because of the movement of the beast tide. After hearing Hayden's instructions, the rest of the students all showed their origins and followed his instructions toward his position. The same goes for Tina and the others. After several flashes, they stood at a position not 1 or 2 meters away from Hayden. Although at this moment, because of the close contact with the fallen giant thorn tiger, a sense of shock appeared even more. But also because of the invisible, but the sense of deterrence that can be felt from all other aspects, everyone immediately put aside their feelings about the thorn tiger. Among the more than 30 people on the field at this moment, only Hayden knew exactly what they and the others were going to meet next. Everyone unanimously looked at Hayden. After feeling the gaze of everyone, Hayden looked at Tina without expression. As the feeling of vibration became stronger and stronger, the beast wave gradually surrounded them in a small circle. Afterwards, Hayden, with a solemn expression, didn't talk nonsense, and simply told them about the current situation. Now the beasts on the island are gathering together and attacking us, ready for battle. If you don't want to fight, you can leave by moonlight. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi, but justice never retreats. When the words were over, Hayden immediately pulled out the sleeve Shirayuki who had retracted the scabbard. Although it is said that, in his heart, Hayden thought of a possibility. What if this thorny tiger is not a past condition? Or is this abnormal animal tide a condition? After all, no matter what, it is impossible that once we arrive on the island, nothing will happen, but the beasts on the island all get irritable at the same time, which seems unlikely. Everyone was silent for a moment, and they digested what Hayden had just told them in their hearts. Hayden's expression just now didn't seem to be joking. In less than a blink of an eye, everyone made a decision. Smog took a deep sip of his cigar, and elementized his fists. Advertisement. Huadi beasted his whole body, showing the form of a jaguar. Tina glanced at Hayden and moved her shoulders, moved her body, and got ready for fruiting ability. Bedwell had already pulled out his dragon and phoenix. Then all the students in the rest of the field all assumed their fighting poses. Did not say a word, just silently express it with action. At this time, Hayden looked at their choices, but didn't want to continue to add them. Because they are already here. You know it from the giant tree that fell to them in advance and the billowing smoke and dust rising from the forest in front of you. This ferocious and unstoppable aura has fallen on their faces. Ready. Hayden clenched his sleeves subconsciously. Bai Shui shouted. Then, there was a swish sound. The first beast leapt out, and its violent movement directly hit a student at the outermost periphery of the formation at the moment. Everyone did not have time to react, even including Hayden. The people who took a slower shot immediately looked at the place where the person stood just now, and then hurriedly looked back in front of them. Immediately after the next blink, with another beast roar, another big beast rushed out. At this time, They reacted. A student who was proficient in 6 forms shot directly with his feet and cut off the beast. Then, the third offensive was not just one coming out of the thick smoke. Boom, boom, boom. From all directions up, down, left and right, countless beasts protruded from the smoke and dust at the same instant. They are of different sizes, even beasts that are not as tall as them. They are spotty, and their eyes are flushed without exception. In an instant, the time on the court seemed to stop at this moment. Advertisement. The people in the middle of the field immediately fell into the bottom of their inner world. There are only 30 of them, and the beasts they have to face are countless beasts. Even if one is solved by one move, the extra beasts can still bury them alive. Then, in the extremely noisy environment on the court, they heard a particularly eye-catching sound. Free punishment. Immediately afterwards, they felt that the temperature in the environment was dropping rapidly at the moment, and the exhaled air had condensed into ice crystals. Along with the roar of the soaring spiritual pressure column, Hayden released his incomplete solution. The hair instantly turned white, and the short sleeves of the upper body instantly formed into scum and floated in the air. Only the sleeve of pure ice appeared on the right arm holding the sleeve Shirayuki. The left eye was in a normal state, and the pupil of the right eye became pure white. This was Hayden's incomplete name that Shu Baishui told him one night while he was waiting for graduation, and he was liberated by Zhanpakudao. That is not a solution. Facing this uncountable beast tide, Hayden could only choose a wide range of attacks. Then a moment passed. The skyrocketing spiritual pressure was completely liberated on Hayden's body. Then, is the silence of the world. Everyone close to Hayden was covered with a layer of frost at this time, and the body core temperature was slowly dropping. And the beast tide in front of everyone. At this moment, all the beasts stiffened, even if they were jumping in midair, they fell to the ground with a dong dong dong. All, without one exception. Because at the moment they felt a sense of pressure that was so strong that they couldn't control their bodies, they couldn't help lying on the ground and shuddering. The beast tide gathered in a circle stopped at this moment. All the fierce beasts faced Hayden, who was holding the ice blade high in front of him, and lay down on their bodies. Long live the king. Chapter 64 Impossible. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Free punishment. It is the liberation that is only one step away from the liberation of Shu Baishui's true posture. The dazzling beam of light that suddenly rises is the creation of Hayden's high-purity spiritual pressure liberation, with overwhelming deterrence and pure whiteness. At this moment, the sleeve Baishui held high in his hand is not the appearance of an ordinary blade. In addition to the pure white handle, the blade is replaced by a condensed ice blade. Within the circle where Hayden and the other students stood, it seemed that the atmosphere had been affected. The summer climate of this first layer disappeared instantly, and the air that was distorted in the line of sight due to the heat suddenly became blurred. It was the influence of the white and cold fog. With Hayden as the center, the spreading ice and snowstorm mixed with spiritual pressure instantly swept the surrounding area, and a wide white circle appeared in the green ocean. This is Hayden's the realm of ice. Hiss. Subconsciously using his nose and mouth, he breathed in and out, and the indifferent Hayden began to move. Baishui slowly put down his high sleeves, and then shook the knife, but with a light wave, the direction of the blade's slashing direction actually pierced the ice from the ground. Then Hayden slowly looked around with his pupils of different colors at this time. After the innumerable beasts were liberated, they all stiffened as if the switch controlling the body was turned off, and they also blocked them like an invisible wall of air in Hayden and other students. Outside the circle, the fierce beast that rushed in front of them at the beginning was pressed underneath by the same kind that was too late to react and were unable to react. They were stacked one by one, forming a wall of beasts in a circle, and their bodies were still covered. Covered with a white duvet. Then Hayden looked at Tina, the others, and noticed that their bodies were also covered with a layer of frost. At the same time, their eyes, without exception, all stared at Hayden who was standing among them at the moment. What a power! It can be compared with the freezing ability of Lieutenant General Kuzan. Staring at Hayden's form at the moment, their brains fell into a short-lived state of sluggishness. Advertisement. Then also at this time. At the edge of this area affected by Hayden's half swastika, the spreading wind and snow stopped abruptly in front of Raman's eyes. This phenomenon shocked Raman, who was on the way to the column road, quickly stopped and looked in the direction where the beam of light had just risen. Feeling the movement of the beast wave trembling further and further away from them, Raman took his 2 bodyguards and set off to the 2nd floor. As a result, he almost felt the power of Hayden's liberation on the way. This soaring beam of light, and the sudden drop in the temperature of the air at this time, this bizarre influence can only be achieved by Hayden. Moreover, Raman immediately realized there was one more thing. The earth trembling under his feet did not move behind the beam of light that was gradually dissipating at this time. Raman suddenly had a bad guess in his heart. Hayden wouldn't have solved the beast tide so quickly, or how could he suddenly lose his voice? Raman couldn't believe it. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. What kind of strength is needed to solve all the beasts on this island in such a short period of time, even if teacher Zephyr personally takes action a little more than this time? Astonished at this point, Raman immediately changed his destination to the direction that the beam of light had just raised. Fortunately, the location where Raman stopped was not far from Hayden's current location. Driven by the surprised emotions, the 3 Ramans, who used their full speed, arrived near Hayden's location in a short while. As we get closer and closer to Hayden's radioactive source, the temperature in the air also decreases. This situation was the effect of Hayden's restraint because someone was next to him. Then, the Raman trio saw a scene where they couldn't believe their eyes at this moment. All the beasts with their backs to them were all crawling on the ground, and their bodies covered by a layer of ice and snow were trembling all the time, and the 3 of them could even smell the fear that the beasts collectively exude at this moment. And he was unaware of the 3 of them, as if they didn't exist. Advertisement. What the hell happened here? Unknown situation. At this time, the Raman trio didn't know whether they should climb over the beast wall to see what happened behind the beast wall. The 3 looked at each other silently, curiosity still prevailed. In the next few months, they crossed the animal wall, and finally reached the most central place enclosed by the animal wall, where Hayden and the rest of the students participating in the assessment were located. Although his appearance has changed slightly, Raman can still recognize him. At this moment, Hayden in the middle of the venue, who gave him a strong sense of oppression, also immediately knew why the animal tide stopped. Then he looked at the thing next to Hayden again. It was actually the most powerful beast on the 1st level of intelligence, a tiger species with huge spikes all over it. TMD, this can be solved by him. And judging from the situation on his body, it seems that the beast hasn't been injured at all to clean up the beast. Raman resisted the mania in his heart at this moment, and kept his emotions from showing, being noticed by Hayden. The rest of the students, who were shaking slightly, felt a little strange when someone rushed in. Hayden didn't turn his attention to the 3 people who had just entered. He carefully looked at the beast wave that he had stopped at the moment, but he was thinking to himself. Autumn bean sacks. I haven't done any tricks yet. Why did they fall down automatically? Although since the last time it was suspected to be indistinct, his spiritual pressure had increased by a large amount after waking up, and after that, he realized the incomplete solution. Hayden also found a place to practice this incomplete solution by himself, but it was precisely because he had not liberated this new trick in the war. At this time, he did not have a specific concept of his own strength. Advertisement. At the same time, Zephyr and others, who had previously set off from the logistics ship on the coast, finally arrived at the scene at this time. As early as when Hayden exploded with spiritual pressure and the beam of light rose, Zephyr immediately understood who released this thing, which was no different from the scene he had seen before on Peach Island. Immediately afterwards, Zephyr perceives something surprising from his domineering look. At the same time the beam of light was rising, the large crowd of beasts gathered together unexpectedly stopped moving and stopped in place, and Hayden and the others seemed to be in no serious condition. Even though his own domineering appearance told him so, but at this moment, Zephyr didn't believe his feelings a bit, he had to see it with his own eyes. Therefore, Zephyr and several accompanying lieutenants hovered over Hayden's head on the moon step at this moment, staring down. The beast wave that surrounded Hayden and the others suddenly stopped moving at a distance of only a few steps. Impossible. What is this ability? Even if it was the fact that he saw with his own eyes now, the few lieutenants behind Zephyr still couldn't believe his eyes. How could this group of naval imps stop this torrent of beasts, even if they encountered this situation, they would not choose to head on. Looking at the area below that seemed to have changed the color directly, Zephyr fell silent, because he knew who made this phenomenon happen. This kid is growing his strength at a terrifying rate every day. Go. Zephyr ordered to return to the ship without knowing what to say. After all, the situation below has been controlled. The assessment continues. Chapter 65. Go to the second floor. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Am I so strong? The puzzled Hayden looked at the group of beasts still afraid to move at the moment, and nodded a little strangely. Then he looked at Tina and the others. Tina and the others looked at them as if they couldn't stand the cold. Tina tremblingly said to Hayden, "You idiot, quickly unlock your abilities." Her cold nose trembling almost fell into her mouth. Seeing this, Hayden hurriedly cancelled the incomplete solution. The white hair dyed by the white snow on the sleeves returned to normal black a little bit, and the pupil of the right eye also returned to its original color. The entire right arm covered with the ice armor, the ice on it gradually broke and turned into countless ice crystals. However, the atmosphere that was suddenly frozen would not be able to return to its previous temperature for a while. Finally, his grandma has a leg. Hayden had no clothes on his upper body. The outer jacket was thrown away at the very beginning because of the thorny tiger, and the last short sleeve of the upper body was also shattered into ice dregs after incomplete swastika just now. Bye. He was shirtless in broad daylight, and Hayden was a little uncomfortable, but now there is nothing he can do about it. Hayden then retracted sleeve Shirayuki into the scabbard around his waist. With a click, it was like a reminder sound, and the group of creeping beasts received instructions to resume their activities. Every beast shook the snowflakes on its fur subconsciously. After it was cleaned, it was as if the ground under its feet turned into a terrifying magma, and fled here without looking back, and escaped from the previous forcible suppression. Their little bit Hayden. Suddenly, the surrounding environment immediately became wider. Immediately afterwards, the students around were almost relieved at this time, recalling the scene of Hayden just now in their minds, still a little unbelievable. Advertisement. They are at the same level, that guy Hayden is so much better than them. The expressions on everyone's faces were different, and then he signaled to Hayden, and set off directly towards the giant column that was ascending to the second floor. After all, they are still undergoing assessment. As for Ramen and his 3 people, they left here long ago and went straight to the second floor. Since the first move did not pit Hayden, then he has a second move. During the assault, feeling the cold last tube of medicine in his arms, Ramen thought silently in his heart. However, Tina and the others, after everyone set off to the second floor, remained in place at the moment. Tina, whose body gradually recovered its temperature, came forward and gave Hayden a chestnut. Oh, Hayden, who had no defense against Tina, was so painful that he immediately grabbed his forehead and cried out, "What are you doing? What are you talking about? Are you trying to cold kill your boss? Huh. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Tina's little mouth slowly recovered the blood color and immediately replied. She was also wearing only thin clothes and she was really frozen by that just now. How can I control the intensity? Hayden answered immediately. Tina just wanted to say something, but she paused for a while after thinking of something in her mind before she said again. But you did a great job this time, you deserve to be Tina's little brother. After speaking, she patted Hayden on the shoulder again as a sign of encouragement. Instead, 3 black lines that didn't exist on Hayden's forehead were photographed. At this time, Small and the others also stepped forward. Smog reignited the cigar that had just been extinguished, and said lightly, "It seems that your strength has increased again." The beastly demonized Quiddy, his expression was somewhat unfinished, and he asked, "Next, go straight up or do some dressing." Advertisement. Hayden looked at them several times, and then said, "You go up first, I'm here to regain strength, anyway, there are still 2 days." Just now, it was only a few minutes of incomplete swastika, and it directly swallowed almost half of Hayden's spiritual pressure, which rose fiercely and consumed fiercely. Although there was no physical damage to his body, the sharp reduction of spiritual pressure prevented Hayden from welcoming the next level with a complete posture. It just happens that the time used by this first layer is still surplus, which can be used to restore his spiritual pressure. Well then, Queedy didn't care much either. Then Tina, Smog and others left here after saying hello to Hayden in the same way. Then, the calm in this area finally recovered the day before, even quieter than before. The beasts in the area were all due to Hayden's reasons, for fear of avoiding them, and the remaining small insects were also lost because of the environmental changes caused by his incomplete solution. In this space, there is really only one living thing left by Hayden. The surrounding giant trees were also crushed by the beast tide, all dumped to the ground, and the nearby field of vision has now become better. Hayden found a barely level ground, sat down with his legs crossed, and then couldn't help but raised his head to look at the giant column standing not far from the prescription position. Then I imagined the scene of waiting for the second floor in my mind. I remembered that when I was at sea before, I saw that the edges of the second floor were all covered with flowers. He couldn't imagine what would be waiting for him on the second floor. ... Gather the souls in the air. 2 hours later. Hayden was almost full of his blue bars, and without further delay, he flew directly towards the eye-catching giant column. But Hayden did not intend to fly directly to the second floor. That's because he didn't notice any gaps in the connecting point between the upper column and the huge land on the second floor. Advertisement. The giant column supported a total of 3 layers of land above it, like the trunk of a giant tree, supporting an unimaginable weight. If you want to fly directly to the second floor, it will not work from directly below the second floor of land. You can only fly up from the outside of the island after flying out of the island. So if this is the case, the way to get to the second floor from the island must be in this column. As he walked closer and looked to the sides, he couldn't see the column on the side. Hayden thought silently in his heart. Where? Hayden was flying at low altitude along the edge of the cylinder, trying to find a place to go in. The rain forest near the column has not been affected by the beast tide. At this moment, the scene of the forest that had been receding backwards suddenly changed. Hayden immediately stopped in midair and looked down. Suddenly a natural gap appeared in the dense forest scenery below, and under the gap was a rather small river flowing. This unexpected situation naturally attracted Hayden's attention, and he flew down without even thinking about it. Landing steadily on the bank of the river, Hayden felt a little strange looking at the rushing river in front of him, and the direction of the river. Generally speaking, in this case, the flow of the river is from the inside to the outside, but the river seems to flow towards the center of the island. Suspicious, Hayden immediately looked in the direction of the river. Then, Hayden saw a cave that appeared to be artificially dug out at the end of the river. Chapter 66 Attack Through the Brain. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The cave abruptly appeared at the bottom of the giant column. The edge of the cave was smooth and did not seem to be formed naturally. Only the dark scene can be seen when looking in. Seeing this, Hayden naturally did not want to stay on the bank of the river. Second words did not directly stick to the turbulent river below and flew past the river. The speed was so fast that the momentum erupted from the whole body immediately marked a trace on the river surface. In the blink of an eye, Hayden's position was close to the entrance of the cave, slowing his flight speed involuntarily. At this time, the river below has changed from a slightly turbulent degree to a roaring form inadvertently, and the sound of the river flowing has increased into a roar, and mist full of water emerged. The drizzle, like an enhanced version, immediately stained Hayden's body. The dense water mist touched the uncovered skin, causing him to squint his eyes. At this time, Hayden was already hovering at the entrance of the cave, and at the same time he could see exactly what was going on inside. The backflowing river water fell straight down in the cave, as if there was a cliff at the end. Then there was a deafening noise. This river with a huge amount of water fell into the bottom, and then it was mixed with the strong air current that appeared to be underground, and it skyrocketed for 90,000 miles. The relatively confined space in this giant cylinder further intensified the roar of this phenomenon, as if the eardrum was shaking constantly. Damn! Why is this sound so loud? Hayden, who was startled by this situation, immediately regained his consciousness. The noise really made his ears hurt. Folding his brows, Hayden didn't stay any longer, so he rushed in directly from the entrance of the cave and boarded the second floor. Looking at the light from above, Hayden flew directly in the direction of the light. Then, He came to the second floor. The exit location is a hole where strong winds are coming out. As soon as it comes out, you will reach the second floor, and the place where you climb to the third floor seems to be in another location. Advertisement. After staying in a relatively dark environment for a few minutes, it suddenly returned to a bright environment, and Hayden's eyes were still a little uncomfortable. After he blinked vigorously, what caught his eyes was large expanses of wilderness appeared in the pleasant temperature environment. To be precise, large expanses of colorful fields appeared. Plants taller than people occupy the entire second floor area, which is covered with all kinds of Hayden plants I have seen. At this time, a breeze blew, and in this strange scenery, there seemed to be a hint of sweetness in the air. In midair, Hayden looked at the magnificent world below, and he couldn't help but sucked so hard with his nose. There is a strange fragrance in the air. But Hayden didn't like this fragrance very much. After that, he stopped paying attention to the smell in this environment, because he needed to restore his spiritual pressure, which would be later than the others who had already boarded. For fear of missing something, Hayden immediately sensed the spiritual pressure around him. However, he never thought it was. He didn't even perceive anything that could make him perceive near the current location for the first time. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. There are no beasts, and no one who came up first. Hayden subconsciously inhaled the scent in the air, and couldn't help thinking secretly in his heart. What about them? How come there is not even such a thing as a beast? Looking left and right in the air, Hayden immediately increased the range of perception. Spread. Then, he found a weak aura of Reiatsu, and it was a Reiatsu that he knew. This was also the first spiritual pressure he found within the time after he almost opened his perception, and there was no other discovery other than that. Advertisement. Feeling that the current situation is very wrong, Hayden didn't even think about it, and immediately moved towards the position of Reiatsu that he had just discovered. Suddenly, a white mark was drawn in the air. After a while, Hayden rushed to the source of this weak spiritual pressure. Looking at the field below that was pressed out of a clearing by something, a man in a navy uniform was lying there. Hayden immediately fell down, fell to the man, and made some noises instantly when he stepped on the crushed plant. At this moment, the person who seemed to have lost consciousness seemed to feel Hayden's movements and opened his eyes to look at the source of the noise. A person without clothes appeared in the blurred vision. The man lying on the ground forced himself to cheer up, and then took a closer look. It turned out to be Hayden. It is you. This person spoke slowly with his mouth still with blood stains remaining. Now he can only make this reaction, even if a child can simply kill him, he really has no strength. Quote. Hayden looked at the man lying on the ground in silence. Although I knew this person, I didn't say a few words. The clothes on this person are everywhere, and the skin under the clothes can be seen from the cracks, as if countless wounds were cut by a small knife. At this time, he was covered with blood all over his body, as if he had been soaked in the blood that flowed out of him. This unusual wound situation caught Hayden's attention, and he immediately leaned down and asked the man, "What happened? Is the rescuer on the way?" Hearing Hayden's question, the man lying on the ground immobile immediately recalled what happened just an hour or two ago. Advertisement. After boarding the second floor, all of them separated again. When he walked through the wilderness for more than an hour to find the habitat of the customs clearance beast, suddenly, he seemed to be countless Black Point attacked. Everything happened so fast that he had only time to defend himself with an iron block. In the chaos, he crossed his arms above his head and saw clearly what attacked him. Those are flocks of birds, attacking his whole body with their sharp beaks, and immediately pouring endlessly on him. I don't know how long it has passed, the birds left, and then he became like this. He had no choice but to use the little remaining consciousness to take out the signal bug that was protected by his subconscious mind. The person who should be supported is coming soon. I don't know what happened, but you must be careful afterwards. The man lying on the ground spoke slowly, and his voice revealed his weakness at this time. Since the support is already on the way, and in the sense that there is nothing in the vicinity that can threaten this person, Hayden inhaled the scent in the air, and just wanted to signal to leave. Just at this time, in the silent environment near the two of them, a very sharp sound rang out abruptly, as if it could pierce Hayden's eardrums in the air. FK. The irritated Hayden's conditioned reflex immediately covered his ears. It seemed that the sound of piercing the eardrums immediately pierced into the brain, piercing a pair of piercings, causing his facial features to be vicious. ... A moment later passed. The unspeakable pain in his brain gradually dissipated, and Hayden's consciousness recovered. He opened his subconsciously closed eyes and released his hands covering his ears. However, the thing that seemed like a sonic attack just now made Hayden's mood in his heart unable to calm for a long time. 3%. Chapter 67. Second Dance. By Lien. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. What the hell is this TM? This was obviously not something that would normally happen, and Hayden immediately increased his vigilance. When he was caught off guard, the sudden and suspected sonic attack directly caused him to completely lose his ability to move. After recovering, Hayden hurriedly looked around, and at the same time he was using his spiritual pressure to perceive the hidden situation, but he didn't notice anything near him. Now Hayden has opened a full range of 5 kilometers in radius for sensing pressure, but he hasn't found it in a circle with a diameter of 10 kilometers. Then it means that the sonic attack came from a distance, and the attack from such a long distance can actually make one lose control of the body. Unbelievable. Hayden estimated in his mind that it took at least 5 or 6 seconds for the loss of action just now, but fortunately there was nothing else nearby. In case of losing 5 or 6 seconds of time in battle, the enemy can directly chop himself 5 or 6 times. Looking at this person lying on the ground waiting for rescue, he just came out of the same pain, Hayden immediately signaled and left here. The abnormal sound just now made Hayden really have to pay attention, and Hayden, who was flying in midair, immediately opened the full range of perception. 1 second, 2 seconds. After, Hayden noticed 1, 2, and 3 again, and the weak spiritual pressure appeared one after another. It was all the Reiatsu he was familiar with, that is, the Reiatsu of the other students who participated in the assessment together, Duddy and Dick. At this moment, Hayden didn't plan to check the specific situation one by one, because they didn't seem to have anything that could reach their original spiritual pressure, and it was likely that the thing that defeated them had left there. If the thing that defeated so many of them is the same guy. Thinking of this, Hayden noticed a very unusual phenomenon in the perception of Reiki. Advertisement. It's different from the situation where the animal tides are in a circle on the first layer. This time, countless faint light points of aura converged into a ball, and they were moving at a very rapid speed. Their mode of movement is like a huge school of fish that act collectively in the ocean, and they are also like a flock of birds flying in the sky, as if they are fused into a whole and are moving. What's the situation? The puzzled Hayden was thinking. After that, he felt the ray pressure of Tina and the others. They were on the path of this huge ray pressure group. At their speed, the two sides would collide together in the next second. Then, Hayden, who had been flying in the air without stopping, arrived at the scene of the impact at this moment. Hayden, who couldn't help stopping in midair, saw this happening with his own eyes. Not far in front of the sky, the black mass was so dense that it seemed to cover the entire sky in front. The dense black spots are birds of unknown species. Hayden immediately understood what they were, and then he saw the group of birds pouring down towards the ground below them. And below them is exactly where Tina and the others are. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Even hundreds of thousands of bird groups can gather together. Their movements are so great that they hit the ground like a 10,000-ton boulder, directly shaking the wilderness in front of them and arousing soot into the sky. Damn. Hayden, who had reacted, immediately flew towards there, and at the same time started to relieve Shirayuki's sleeve. Hayden doesn't know if Tina can defend against such powerful attacks. In an instant, Hayden at full speed instantly crossed the distance between the two sides. Hayden rushed directly into the flock of birds that hadn't stopped attacking without hesitation. Once inside the flock of birds, the surrounding light instantly disappeared, and there was no light. But he didn't care. Advertisement. A white mist suddenly appeared all over his body, and the mist immediately formed, forming a sphere to envelop Hayden in midair, protecting him from any bird attack. With a deep concentration, the right hand holding Shu Baishui steadily danced diagonally above his eyes at this moment. The tip of the knife tapped the void lightly, and then he stabbed in the direction of the birds. Second dance. Baron. In an instant, A snowstorm formed by turbulent energy spewed out from the tip of the knife, just like the situation when a rocket was launched. The momentum was so strong that at this moment Hayden's body was blowing violently, and the pure white ribbon on the end of the hilt kept dancing. The cold air that broke out was like a silver wandering dragon, ascending into the sky in an instant, swallowing everything in its path. After a while, the cold air dissipated. This time, Tina and the others who didn't understand what happened just on the ground. The air became clear, and a giant icicle appeared obliquely in the air. At this moment, it was slowly falling towards the ground. And inside this icicle, there are countless flocks of birds frozen by Hayden's move. The dense flock of birds that could still cover the sky just now was wiped out by Hayden with just one move. Then, they found Hayden in midair. Tina and the others would never admit the appearance of that figure. This movement is indeed Hayden coming. And Hayden above looked at the flock of birds that had been frozen by him and turned into a popsicle, but somehow he looked at the popsicle that fell to the ground and would surely smash a huge crater. A weird feeling appeared in Hayden's heart immediately, as if he had done one thing, but he always felt like he hadn't done it. Staring at the popsicle slowly falling, he always felt something wrong. In order to prevent accidents, Hayden did not want to go down and meet Tina and the others, giving up the idea of guarding. Then, just like Hayden's defense. Advertisement. Suddenly, the oversized popsicle that was about to hit the ground actually cracked. From the end of the icicle furthest from Hayden, a white mist that obscured the view was stirred up, and the broken ice splashed all over, as if something had broken out of it. Hearing this, Hayden immediately increased his vigilance, and put his body in a posture ready to make a move, holding Baishui's sleeves with cold air in both hands and blocking him in front of him. However, boom! A sound wave that seemed to be condensed into substance swept through Hayden's body. The attack cannot be seen, touched, and cannot be defended. What? This familiar attack was more violent than Hayden felt for the first time. The pain caused Hayden to barely hold the sleeve of Baishui in his hand to prevent her from slipping out of his hand. The foothold created by the spirit child in the condensed atmosphere also became fragile at this time, and the body standing in the air shook. The unbearable feeling couldn't help him to hold his head with his elbow, trying to defend against this inexplicable attack in midair, but it didn't make any difference. Boom! Immediately following it, another inexplicable attack was coming towards Hayden. The difference is that this time it was a violent gust of wind. In an instant, Hayden, who was already barely staying in the air, completely lost his control, his footing was instantly shattered, and his unbalanced body was shot and flew far away by the cutting wind. Hayden, who has lost the ability to control his body, is like a ragdoll, swish, draw a trajectory in the air, and smash it down into a field. Chapter 68, 81 of Bound Dao, Sudden Space. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Ha 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 ha. Finally. Just in a field not far from where the birds attacked, the three Ramans who came up first, with strange gas masks on their faces, seemed to hide here on the grass. Looking at the figure in the sky that was clearly Hayden, there was no way to face the monster's attack. Raman subconsciously glanced at the used pink potion in his hand, couldn't help but smiled. Hey, now I see how you can break this level. Faced with an unknown attack, Hayden was shot down from the air by the monster's attack before he even had time to fight back. The Shu Baishui, which Hayden always held tightly in his hand, broke away from his hand for the first time in the battle, and lost control of Shu Baishui. After the pure white sleeve Baishui slid down from his hand, he inserted it straight and steadily into the ground, and the cold air wrapped around the knife immediately froze the grass near it. As for her master Hayden, he was directly hit by the oncoming gust of wind and flew far away, slamming on the ground with a bang, shaking up a burst of colorful and unknown petals that covered his sight, flying in the air. There are also Tina and others who were just released by Hayden. They were also shocked by the sonic attack and could not move. They came up first and had experienced the power of this attack. They were invisible, untouchable, unable to move. Defense. The most terrible thing is that they haven't figured out where the attack came from. They only know that the source of the attack seems to be launched from the flock of birds, but it doesn't look like it was sent by the flock of birds. Group sound. After the sonic attack just now, he uncontrollably tried to cover his ears to block it, lowered his head and hands to block. Then the pain subsided and looked towards the sky again. They noticed that Hayden, who was still in the sky for a second, disappeared. Hayden! Anxious Tina exclaimed directly. Smog hurriedly looked around the sky but found nothing. No. Advertisement. The same is true for Queedy next to him, squinting his eyes and scanning the sky above his head, but he didn't find anything. I don't know. At this moment, facing an unknown threat, the three of them didn't know whether they should spread out and search for Hayden. At this time, suddenly, the giant icicle that shattered from the end was moving again. Shattering. Flocks and flocks, the flock of birds that had been dealt with by Hayden just now, and the dark clouds covering the sun have been resurrected. At this time, they were flapping their wings from the sky above Tina and the others at super high speed. The collective momentum of the countless birds gathered together was only a distance away from Tina and the others, but they were still able to deeply understand the ground below. Feel this turbulent torrent. However, the flock of birds seemed to ignore the previous target of attack, that is, they were on the ground. The flock of birds acted distinctly, as if they were heading straight towards a certain place. The three people who were feeling strange suddenly thought of the same place. Hayden. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. The three of them immediately glanced at each other, tacitly understanding and without any hesitation, started the sixth stance, and flew away in the wilderness, following the direction of the birds flying above their heads. ITM. Consciousness returned to his own control. Hayden awakened immediately reflexively, not forbidden to sweep away the smoke rising in front of him. After being knocked into the air, he didn't suffer any major problems. That is, his chest was a little panicked by the shock wave, and there was still a remnant of sonic attack in his brain, still mixing his consciousness. Hayden's impact was so strong that after landing from the air, he immediately smashed a human-shaped shallow pit. Then he sat up with his hands on the ground, and then he realized one of the most important things. Advertisement. Where's my TMD knife? Moment. Hayden's eyes hurriedly looked around to the ground, but apart from what was already on the spot, he didn't find his sleeve Baishui. Quote. Shu Baishui was actually lost in the battle by herself. Although he could perceive Shu Baishui's position at the moment, she left her body, not in her hands or in the scabbard, separated from him. Realizing this established fact, Hayden was angry at the attack from this unknown source, and his face sank instantly. MD, he murmured, holding his hands together subconsciously, moving his knuckles and snapping. Then, Hayden just wanted to fly to the previous location, but his ears noticed a strange sound. At this moment, the smoke and dust at the location of the fall have been dispersed. In the next second, Hayden saw the source of the strange sound in his eyes, and it was indeed the flock of birds that had already been dealt with by himself. What? A flock of birds larger than just now will be coming directly to him, and Hayden's eyes can't help but widen, and he can't believe it. The attack power he just released should be able to be solved directly. Even if the fish that slipped through the net were not affected by his attack, there shouldn't be that many, and it seems to be even more than before. A little bigger. At this time, Tina and the others, who were trying their best to keep up with the speed of the bird flock, just rushed to Hayden and saw Hayden's figure. Hayden, be careful. Tina, who was running, saw that the flock of birds above was about to pounce on Hayden, and she subconsciously panicked. At the same time, after Smog and Queedy saw Hayden, their hearts suddenly stopped and their pupils dilated. Advertisement. Because both of them noticed at the same time. At this moment, Hayden didn't even have his inseparable sleeve Baishui. And what it means for a swordsman to have no sword in his hand, the two of them don't know, and they don't want to know. At the next moment, the two did not speak, but as if they had negotiated, they did not hesitate in the next movement. Smog directly elementalized his body and used a white smoke launcher to explode towards Hayden. Queedy instantly turned his whole body into a beast, switched to a beast-like state, which is his fastest state, and galloped toward Hayden on all fours. At this moment, both of them only wanted to get to Hayden's position before the bird attack came. In an instant, Smog and Queedy opened up the distance between them and Tina. Then Hayden sighed. After hearing Tina's yelling, Hayden turned and looked in the direction of the voice with a little doubt. Tina. Then he saw Smog and Quiddy again. Damn, why are they rushing over? Hayden just wanted to stop both of them. At this time, the roar of the birds combined together was already near, and the sky above the four people's heads suddenly disappeared, losing the light of illumination. Hayden reacted quickly and acted immediately. He opened and raised his right hand to aim at the bird flock above his head, his left hand clasped his right wrist, and whispered in his mouth. The pride of heaven, the iron wall, the dragon walk, the lion roar, the tiger roar, the wolf rush, cut off the world before it collapses. 81 of Binding Tao. Suspension. Chapter 69 I am angry. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. At once. No sound. No signs. An air wall that appeared from the void was blocking Hayden's raised right hand. It was almost in the blink of an eye that the air wall was enlarged enough to block the huge number of birds that had gathered at this moment. Then, it was the beginning of the impact. Boom, boom, boom. A huge torrent that no one can contend with was blocked behind this huge transparent wall. Unpredictable power continuously blasted the barrier created by Shanghai Deng, and the air was shaken by the force. However, the seemingly endless attack from the bird flocks cannot break through from any point. Just like a pouring stream of water, the blows on the transparent enchantment can only spread to both sides. Under the continuous bombardment, even a tiny crack did not appear, and the enchantment always maintained its original posture. Duankong separated the two worlds. Above is the world of birds, and below is the shelter of Hayden and others. Countless birds bombarded the plane that emerged out of thin air, bringing with it as if ink was spilled on it, one on top of the other, filling the sky above the head, and the bird that previously covered the top of the head. There is still a gap in the group. This will be completely black. After losing the light, only the left and right sides can provide a blurry field of vision. Smog and Quiddy, who were able to reach Hayden in just 1 second, were immediately shocked by the scene. In the nearby environment, Hayden's voice just now chanting Bound Dao was clear and audible. They had seen something similar to the trick he had read just now, and Hayden had told them that this was a unique ability of his hometown. It's just. This ability is so terrifying. The two stiffened in place, couldn't help looking over their heads. This ridiculous sight was really beyond words. Advertisement. Tina, who took a step later in the evening, was also a little frightened by the situation. The birds that seemed to be within reach looked at the blurred vision in front of him, and Hayden was gritting his teeth. Tina immediately understood the current situation. Hayden didn't know what to block the flock of birds. After a while, the flock of birds that hit the barrier gradually had a gap. Slowly, the last wave from the flock of birds has been cancelled out. The flocks of birds that had gathered in a group were broken up by their own actions, and scattered into flocks of large and small birds, which would slowly gather and take shape again. Seeing that this wave had been blocked, Hayden immediately untied. Hayden's right arm felt a little weak, and he couldn't help shaking his right hand. The spiritual pressure consumed by the number 80 Ghost Dao was indeed a bit fierce, and it lasted for a while. The flock of birds looking at the sky above is in a state of assembly. Hayden looked at Smog, Quiddy, and Tina, who were back to normal. He didn't have time to say anything. You guys quickly change places, they should just be for me. He remembered the scene just now, and the flock of birds came straight to him. Can you stop it all by yourself? Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Smog remembered that although Hayden was able to stop him just now, but from his look at this moment, he seemed to consume a bit too much, and it just blocked the birds, and at the same time his sleeve Baishui hadn't in his hand. If it doesn't work, just retreat with us first. Quiddy quickly suggested that they retreat together temporarily, and then make plans after a short rest. After all, their abilities are good for a single body, and for such a large number of biological groups, even if it is Smog's natural department, he can't hold on to it now. Yes, hurry up and follow Tina. Tina looked a little anxious at Hayden's seemingly unmoved expression. Advertisement. After listening to the three of them, Hayden didn't respond immediately, first raised his head again and looked at the bird group that was almost recovering to full body while speaking. After a moment of silence, Hayden said indifferently, "The three of you should find a place first. I must get rid of this ghost." This group of ghosts dared to separate him from Shu Baishui for so long, and he was completely angry. Hayden subconsciously took a breath of the strange scent in the air, and then before Tina and the three of them could react, he leaned forward slightly. Boom! Immediately kicked the ground hard with both feet, bursting into the air, and the explosive reaction force produced by the intensity directly blasted the ground beneath the feet to collapse. The naked upper body muscles tightened instantly and condensed into steel-like hardness, and the black hair that fell backwards danced like demons in the oncoming wind. His gloomy eyes stared at the bird flock above, but at this moment Hayden's destination was not the bird flock above, but the place where the white snow of his sleeve fell. Boom! 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 A few stepped into the air. Hayden, who switched to the serious form, instantly crossed the distance between him and Shu Baishui. At a glance, Shu Baishui, who had changed into a normal form, was standing quietly on a piece of ice. Even if Guang stood there, Shu Baishui's figure was still so beautiful. Hayden pulled out his sleeve Baishui from the ice, then closed his eyes, holding the knife in both hands and held the sleeve Baishui in front of him. Slightly delay, but here I am. At this moment, Shu Baishui's blade shook slightly. Surprised, Hayden immediately opened his eyes and looked at the sleeve Baishui in front of him. Is this a response to me? He couldn't help muttering to himself. This time, Shu Baishui did not respond, but this did not bother Hayden very much. The feeling of Shu Baishui holding in his hand again is more comfortable than anything else. Then, everything is ready. Advertisement. Hayden raised his head and looked at the birds in the sky above his head at this moment. Without thinking about it, Hayden used his feet to get into the air instantly. The bird flock above seemed to have an induction, and at the same time, it splashed down at Hayden below. Hayden condensed the spirit in the atmosphere at lightning speed to create a foothold, once, twice, 3 times. The bird flocks above also gradually gathered in the middle of them, and the torrent was solidified bit by bit. At this moment, the birds pouring down had no previous gaps among the flocks, and the distance between each one was very close. Slowly on the ground, the flock of birds that were about to hit Shanghai first gathered into a sharp cone shape. In the violent wind blowing against his face, Hayden kept his eyes fixed on the front point of the bird group. The sleeves Baishui clenched with both hands had long been solved by him. The tip of the knife was pointed down, and the body of the pure white knife was constantly releasing a terrifying chill. In the blink of an eye, the specific blade could not be seen, only this moment. Hayden seemed to be holding the power of nature in both hands, holding the snow and ice gushing out of his knife. After a while, Hayden approached the birds, and the sleeve Baishui he was holding had now turned into a giant sword of ice and snow, and he was about to slash with his sword. Then, boom! Unexpected things appeared. This is the 3rd time Hayden has heard this sharp and manic sound. The strong sound waves seemed to form a wave of air visible to the naked eye, directly slapped against Hayden. Hayden lost control again. Only this time, before the attack came, Hayden's eyes saw the source of the attack. In the last second, his attack was about to chop up the overwhelming bird flock, but the bird flock instantly spread out, revealing the center of the huge bird flock. Where the center of the flock was wrapped, there was a bird in it that was different from all the birds that gathered together. And the source of the sonic attack is from its direction. Chapter 70 Bird Storm. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The body is covered with long feathers, fluttering and fluttering. The dark colors are mixed in the flock of birds so that others cannot easily detect it. The tail feathers are divided into 9 parts, with 9 tails. As for its beak and its size, it is much larger than that of ordinary birds. I don't know how many birds seem to flash with a cold light on their beaks, and their size is also unusually large. Sight, hearing, smell, and touch. After receiving this wave of sound waves that cannot be dodged, the ice giant sword that Hayden was about to wield instantly collapsed, breaking into pieces of snow or ice slag. Shu Baishui slid out of his hand for the 2nd time, and this time the blade after Hajime was relieved and immediately returned to its normal state. And Hayden himself. The sonic attack received this time was even more violent than the last 2, and it was even more unbearable for him. The upward trend in the air was immediately shot back to the ground by the air wave. Hayden was struggling to find his self-awareness as he was falling, his mouth opened wide and he wanted to scream, but he couldn't make a sound. He had lost the recognition of the location in his mind. His whole body moved up and down, left and right irregularly while falling, and the consciousness in his brain was slowly dissolving. Boom. Then, Hayden was like a meteorite falling from space. He slammed into the surface and made a not so small pit. ... After a while, the smashed dust was scattered, revealing Hayden lying in the pit. Hiss. Consciousness returned to the brain, the moment after waking up. Hayden immediately took a deep breath, and the air mixed with a little dust entered deep into his lungs. Advertisement. Only then did Hayden gain a little control over his body. Cough, cough, cough. The dust inhaled through his nostrils reacted at this time. Then Hayden coughed up a little blood from his mouth, and the smell of rust spread all over his mouth. He wiped it hard with his hands and said nothing. He hadn't tasted the blood flowing from his mouth for a long time. He raised his head and looked at the thing that was swooping down toward him in the sky at this moment. The big bird that was obviously the boss in the last second did not appear, and it was its little soldier that swooped down. Hayden's heart was a little flustered. These birds were not bothering him, but the sonic attack just now. Although he figured out the source of the attack, he directly lost the ability to resist after a close attack. What's wrong with this mother? Thinking like this, Hayden realized one more thing. His sleeve Baishui was knocked down again. And this time Shu Baishui's falling place seemed to be a bit far away from here. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi mdmdmdmd. One more can't be another two. However, this time, the roaring flock of birds is about to hit Hayden again. Shanto. Hayden didn't intend to resist another hard fight. He immediately changed positions and moved into the air, which happened to be the place of this big bird. Manipulating a swarm of bees swarming up the ground, the body of the big bird has no cover at this time, revealing its true body. Hayden, who was facing the big bird, could clearly see it. Staring at its beak, Hayden's vigilance has increased to the maximum, for fear that it will roar again. Advertisement. And big bird is just as Hayden thought. It saw Hayden's figure appearing in the nearby air, and immediately released a sonic attack again, but this was also a way for it to command the birds below. Finally, this time Hayden was prepared. His eyes were always fixed on its beak. As long as it had a tendency to open, Hayden would immediately retreat as fast as possible to a distance where the sound wave has attenuated. But Hayden was still caught up by its attack. But Hayden had already moved a distance away, and the shock in his brain this time was not enough to make him lose control for a while. And during the discomfort, Hayden squinted his eyes and looked at the birds in the sky that had once again assembled into a complete flock. There is no sign of the big bird around the flock, so it must have hidden inside again. Hayden was observing the situation of the birds at the moment, and then he noticed a strange phenomenon in his sight. The complete flock of birds did not attack him directly, but combined into a huge ball, and it seemed to be slowly spinning and accelerating at this time. Although Hayden didn't understand it for the first time, he understood one thing. The movement made by the birds now will definitely not be a good thing. Thinking of this, Hayden immediately went to the place where Shu Baishui fell. After all, without his own sleeve Baishui in his hands, Hayden really had no way to deal with the birds for a while. This time the place of drop was a bit far away. After Hayden retrieved his sleeve and Baishui hurried back. Hayden stood in the air staring at what he saw a little dazedly. The huge spinning bird ball in the sky just now has become another thing. The rotating speed of the flock of birds that will converge has reached a terrifying point, and the air that it drives has gradually formed a tornado storm. The strong momentum that erupted from the place of the bird group couldn't help making Hayden use his left hand to block him. Leaning forward slightly, the only remaining pants on his body were blown against his body, and his hair was blown back. Flying. Oh no. Advertisement. This scene of the world's discoloration cannot help but make Hayden feel a little bit tricky, and now he rushes up to be stirred in the washing machine as clothes. Even if it is a flock of birds that Hayden can solve without much effort, this will be something created by their collective action. Now that converged into a tornado storm that did not know how many forces gathered together. This is not a trouble that Hayden can easily solve. As time passed, the power contained in the tornado storm gradually increased, and the momentum gradually increased. Just at this time, inadvertently, suddenly, the tornado storm containing the violent nature's power suddenly exploded. Boom. Before Hayden could react, the burst of air had already swept him. The aura was so strong that he couldn't open his eyes. Even if Hayden was in midair, he was pushed back a long way, and his feet dragged a trail in the air. However, what followed was strange. This erupting tornado storm seemed to carry a strange smell. Hayden didn't know how he would pay special attention to the smell in the air at this moment, but he noticed the smell in this chaotic situation. After a while, Hayden just wanted to do something, but he noticed. The action that wants to raise the head, the action that wants to raise the hand, the action that wants to rush forward. Wait, no matter what the action is, as long as his body wants a slight movement, then Hayden will be able to realize that every step he takes is slower. The world has slowed down. Chapter 71 / to cut the world. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. After a while, as the tornado storm exploded, the sky full of smoke that erupted gradually disappeared, and the appearance of the second layer also appeared again. However, the second floor, which was swept by the tornado storm, was no longer the original scenery. The colorful sea of flowers disappeared. Under the violent attack of the tornado storm, all the plants on the ground were uprooted without exception, and then followed by the spreading air waves. I do not know where they were taken. At this moment, the ground above was a vast wilderness, which became bald at this moment, leaving only large patches of light brown flat ground. What happened to me? This will make Hayden feel very bad and uncomfortable in midair, as if the signal to control his body has been delayed. It feels like he is always slow to take a shot, and it feels a little strenuous to use some strength. He was so anxious that Hayden hurriedly looked around his whole body, but there was no other discovery, nothing unusual. At this time, the flock of birds and the big birds among them moved. After releasing the storm, the flocks of birds did not gather together again, but scattered one after another, densely filling the sky where they were. A huge wall of birds divides the entire second floor area into two. Facing Hayden, behind the wall is the only way to climb the third floor. As for the big bird among them, the king of the beasts in this layer is hovering in front of the flock of birds and flapping its wings, with sharp eyes staring at the tiny figure of Hayden. The reason it just manipulated the birds to condense a storm is nothing else, just to spread the unique substance it released to all areas of the second layer. Why is this bird named Ming, called the king of beasts in this second level? That's because the second layer of air naturally has a strange scent permeating all the time. This scent will unknowingly make the creatures in the area feel uncontrollable to attract them, and they will not immediately aware of this fact. Then, after inhaling the substances that are always present in the air, they are matched with the things released by the dreams. If something is inhaled at the same time, it means that the physical reaction of the victim will always be unable to keep up with the five-sense reaction, and even the control of the body will always be slower. Advertisement. It's a coincidence. Right below this big bird, it was exactly where Tina and the others were standing. After Hayden rushed directly, none of the three of them had time to react. Although the three of them tended to retreat temporarily before making any plans, looking at the figure of Hayden rushing up, in this case, the three of them would naturally not let Hayden go up alone. But below them, they are still so one step short of rushing to Shanghai every time. Tina, Smog, and Quidi, who were under the big bird, were of course unavoidably affected by things in the air, and the movements of the three began to become stiff. After several experiments in the sky, Hayden suddenly felt a little nauseous, and then stopped. I can't think of what caused it when I hollow my head, so naturally it must have been caused by the big bird. Squinting his eyes and staring at the big bird in front of him, Hayden thought silently in his heart. MD, even if you take a slow shot, I can still cut you down as long as I take a minute. After Hayden said, he lifted his sleeve Baishui directly to the big bird in front of him and cut it off. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi, a lot of bells and whistles, cut it and it's done. At this moment, Hayden exploded with all his strength. Usually during the battle, he doesn't use all his power during the sprint, but special circumstances are treated specially. However, the next second, he was about to get close to the big bird, and the big bird unexpectedly folded its wings and dived straight down. What? Hayden just thought in his mind, and then he looked down. Big Bird's dive target turned out to be Tina, who should have already left, standing on the ground below. Advertisement. I'm Sal. Hayden's eyes widened immediately, and a panic broke out in his heart. Responding quickly, Hayden immediately changed his way, and also swooped down in the direction of Tina. At the same time as she fell, her left hand brushed over the blade of Shirayuki's sleeve to relieve her ability, and she gripped the hilt with both hands. In an instant, all memories of slashing, kendo, etc. flashed through Hayden's mind like a movie. Relative to the speed of the bird's dive at the moment, the distance and the timing of the fall were later than the opponent. At this moment, Hayden could only stop the bird with his own slash. Reinforcement, mind, plus all of Shanghai Dang. Hayden poured everything into this slash that was about to be slashed. The cold air on the knife body is no longer the temperature that was normally liberated at this moment, and the blade body that condensed a huge spiritual pressure has now turned into a lightsaber made of pure energy. And that light, it's so dazzling. A moment later, Hayden calculated where the bird would move to in the next moment, and swung out all his flying slashes. Catch up for me. His roar seemed so pale. In an instant, an unsightly light burst out abruptly in the sky, and the temperature in the air instantly dropped to freezing point, as if it could directly cut through the entire second layer of the huge sword energy to reveal the figure. At the same time, the three of Tina at the bottom, after they noticed the big bird attacking from above, because their physical reaction ability was greatly affected, it was too late for the three of them to want to dodge. Looking at the beak that swooped down like a bird that could penetrate anything, Quincy directly beasted his whole body towards Tina and went to protect her, even if he could avoid it a little at this moment. In the end, although Smog of the Nature Department would not be harmed, the two companions were not the same. He used his most powerful move so far and rushed to the center of the attack he was about to meet, even if he could just reduce any power. Time seems to freeze at this moment. Advertisement. The bird's attack was about to hit the ground, and the three of Tina responded individually, and the huge ice-cold sword energy was slashing towards the bird's body. Time to recover. Boom. The big bird's sharp beak engulfed the unstoppable momentum first hit Smog, and instantly disintegrated his defenses, and then hit the surface just a few meters away from Tina and Quincy. Immediately afterwards, the huge sword energy that Hayden cut out was long overdue. Even though the huge sword energy is almost catching up with the big bird, it has even cut its tail diagonally. However, with the slightest difference, the timing of 1,000 miles, I couldn't completely catch up. It was such a gap that caused the bird's attack to not be interrupted, and its attack was centered, almost achieving perfect results. The astonishing attack of the big bird directly caused a large part of the ground to sink, and the fierce shock wave that broke out engulfed the gravel and immediately blasted the three of Tina. However, Hayden's huge sword energy did not stop after slicing the bird's tail, and it didn't even mean to become smaller, and then touched the ground. The huge sword energy that was slashed down was like there was nothing in front of it, and the solid surface seemed to be unable to stop its offensive, and it instantly sank into the surface. Then, a long and huge gully cut by sword aura appeared, and it was not unusual. It was just like a crack in a giant iceberg. The ice cold instantly froze everything it had touched. What remains is the ice and snow. The two attacks that hit the surface almost at the same time shook the entire second floor, stirring up thick billowing smoke mixed with an icy atmosphere. After the impact, Hayden stopped in midair. Because, at this moment, the world in front of him has become blurred, and nothing can be seen. 24%. Chapter 72. This is what you asked for. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. At #FK. The scene in front of me was blurred, and I could only feel the aftermath of the cold after the explosion of thick smoke and white snow. Everything happened at the same instant just now. In addition, his body's ability to react was affected. Even if Hayden had a good line of sight in the sky, he didn't see it for the first time. The chaotic situation immediately caused Hayden's emotions in midair to be very flustered, and for a moment he suddenly forgot that he still had a sense of spiritual pressure to gain access to the situation below. After he was relieved, Hayden immediately remembered that there was still spiritual pressure that could be used to view the lower part, and the spiritual pressure perception immediately extended to the area below. And below the thick smoke and dust that has not dissipated, He has a situation that he doesn't want to know from his Reiki perception. The familiar Tina's spiritual pressure was like a candle in the wind at this moment, as if it was going to be extinguished by the breeze at any time. FK. Hayden didn't even think about it, and dived straight down. At this moment, he didn't want to believe in his own perception. He had to see it with his own eyes. Hayden drew a trace in the smoke, and then fell to the side of Tina's pressure position with a boom. The violent landing sound immediately shook away the smoke and dust in the nearby air, clearing out the area that could be seen clearly. At this time, cracks of various sizes appeared everywhere on the ground, not a flat one at all. Hayden immediately looked at the location of Tina reinforcement, just as he perceived it. Advertisement. Tina, who was in a coma at this time, was lying on an upturned piece of ground, and it seemed that something dark red was slowly sliding down the ground from under her body. ITM. He rushed up after seeing the murmur of Hayden. After approaching, Hayden was able to see more clearly, and his face became even worse. Naturally, her blood flowed out of Tina. Her long pink hair had lost her luster, her eyes were closed tightly, and her white cheeks were also stained with sand and dust, and she also had a few scratches on her body. The clothes were also affected and cracked. The most important thing is that the main wound should be on the back from the point of view of the blood volume and location. Fortunately, thinking that it is important to save my life, I exchanged the way. Hayden frowned, then squatted down, carefully lifted Tina from the raised ground, and then found a relatively flat ground to put it on. Go up. There were no obvious wounds on the front. Hayden slowly turned Tina over and lay it flat. He looked at the signs of blood and blood on his back. His face sank again, and his preparations for treatment paused for a while. Come out and replied. At this time, Quincy, Smog and others also slowed down. Smog naturally didn't matter much, but Quincy suffered a lot of shocks, but with the recovery ability of the animal fruit, this would almost restore him to an active state. The two of them happened to find the positions of Hayden and Tina from different directions. They watched Hayden's hand putting a green light on Tina's body, although they didn't understand what Hayden was doing, but they also knew that Hayden should not be disturbed. After the two leaned over, they stood quietly beside Hayden and Tina, guarding against the remaining smoke and dust around them, in case something attacked. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. The matter is not over, it is better to say that it has just begun. Hayden glanced at both Smog and Quincy, and did not stop, continuing to release the reply regardless of the consumption of spiritual pressure. At the same time, under the green light of Hayden's treatment, Tina's severely injured back was gradually returning to its perfect condition. After a while, Tina's back wound was roughly repaired by Hayden, but the answer he exchanged was not a panacea. He could only treat it to this degree, and Tina showed no signs of waking up. Similarly, during this treatment period, the smoke rising around has gradually dissipated, showing the appearance after the impact. Advertisement. Smog, Quincy, Hayden said when he stood up silently looking at Tina who was in a coma, you two take Tina to find a safe place and use Tina's signal bug. In order to support other injured students on this second floor, the teacher should have already sent people to this second floor. As he said, Hayden moved the right arm that held Shirayuki's sleeve. Tina should be able to receive medical support soon, but after you send Tina, don't hinder me when you come back. Looking down at the swaying right arm, it still looked a bit slow motion, Hayden didn't care. Quote. I'm going to kill the big bird above. Words fall. Hayden looked up at the big bird in the sky that was flapping its wings as if he was proud of. Punishment in vain. With a boom, Hayden's remaining spiritual pressure burst out instantly. The aura around him suddenly became agitated, and the dazzling white light immediately wrapped around him with the Hittite chill. The hair turned white in 1 second from front to back, the pupil of his right eye was also covered by cold air, and a piece of ice armor of the right arm was instantly frozen on the right arm holding the knife. Hurry up! Hayden glanced back at Small and the two, and then sprayed into the sky regardless of their reactions. The two of Smog and Quincy below, but unconsciously followed Hayden's figure straight to the sky. They both saw Hayden speaking in the tone just now, as if under a calm surface. In fact, there are thousands of murderous opportunities hidden. There was a moment of silence, and the two immediately glanced at each other without speaking, and hurriedly evacuated from this place carrying Tina's body, ready to go to the area where they first came up. Shu Baishui's true ability is not simply to release cold air from the knife to freeze the enemy, but to gradually reduce the body temperature of the holder, below the freezing point, and then everything it touches will instantly freeze. The last trick Shu Baishui first solved absolute zero. After lowering the temperature, everything that Shu Baishui's blade touched would instantly freeze. Advertisement. And her Wan Jia after Bai Sha's punishment, expanded the range of absolute zero. When the whole body was touched outside, plus the range of cold air diffusion, everything touched would freeze instantly. Then the effect of incomplete swastika is that everything that Hayden's entire right arm of ice touches at this moment will instantly freeze. However, even if Hayden's right arm was suffering from an unbearable low temperature, he didn't feel the slightest when he lifted into the air at high speed. Staring at the proud bird in the sky, Hayden, holding the ice blade, estimated the distance. After a while, Hayden slashed directly. At once, a half-moon-shaped sword air appeared from the tip of his ice blade. The bright and clean cold light shot directly at the big bird in the sky at a very fast speed, and the air where the sword aura reached was immediately frozen into a cloud of solidification. Looking at the incoming sword energy, the big bird flapped its wings violently, shifting directly, easily dodged the attack. Immediately afterwards, the big bird didn't stop at the slightest, and then opened its huge wings, and slammed it towards the little bit who was still approaching. In an instant, there were fluctuations in the space. Chapter 73 Say My Name. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The two wings of Mingmeng spread out as if covering the sky and the sun. The mad tornado combined by its two wings fanning out instantly took shape, and it was violent and fierce visible to the naked eye, as if it could destroy everything. Within 2 seconds, Crazy Tornado rushed in front of Hayden. Hayden, who was trying to rush to the bird, didn't want to harden his mind. He twisted his body slightly, and skipped the mad tornado that was hiding from it. But Hayden was still wiped a bit by the attack, and a small blood stain appeared on his face immediately. Hayden didn't care, staring at the big bird above, and then several successive sword auras were cut out. However, the strange thing is that even if Hayden calculated the attack distance and the attack point, the sword energy he swayed would not hit the big bird, and he would easily dodge it every time. At this time, Hayden had already flown to the same level as the bird, his movements stopped, and there was no move for the time being. Sure enough, the reaction was affected too deeply. Hayden stared at the big bird not far ahead, thinking secretly in his heart. However, the big bird opposite him wouldn't let him stop and think about it in a daze. The big bird immediately pointed to Hayden with its right wing, and the flock of birds that formed a huge wall behind it began to move. Under the lead of the first bird, the countless birds behind him followed the actions of the first bird and gradually gathered together again. The roaring noise of countless wings flapping sounded again, and the flock of birds swarmed toward Hayden again. Hayden didn't intend to let the birds get close to his body, and directly swiped a few swords, slashing towards the flying birds. It's just that this time the flock of birds, watching the attack on them, immediately took action, and a gap was immediately opened in the dense center, just enough for Hayden's sword to pass straight through. Advertisement. Although Hayden's icy sword aura froze a few of the similar species that were close together, the birds still didn't want to stop. Nothing can stop what the birds are thinking at the moment, that is, tearing up the human in front of them. Damn. Hayden watched these birds become more flexible, and just cut a few times in vain. The number of flocks of birds swarming is astonishing, and the sky in front of him does not have any gaps for Hayden to pass through. In this case, the roar of the birds was already close to his ears, and Hayden, who was muttering to himself, immediately shot. Ray pressure instantly converged on the left hand, reaching out to the flock of birds, and the yellow thunder light emerging from the left hand suddenly exploded, sending out a sizzling electric sound. 63 Broken Road. Thunder Cannon. Immediately, a thunder dragon rushed out of Hayden's left hand, and screamed at the center of the birds in front of him. After the release, Hayden did not stand on the spot, but directly kicked his legs backward and followed behind Thunder Dragon. The moment the Thunder Dragon hit the flock of birds, it evaporated immediately, even if it was only a little electric bird, and Hayden then rushed out of the channel he created in the middle of the flock. Immediately afterwards, Hayden finally narrowed the distance with the big bird, and he finally got close to a fighting distance he was accustomed to. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Looking at the big bird's eyes with both eyes, the trace of horror seen in the big bird's eyes made Hayden's emotions in his heart even more excited at the moment. Without further ado, Hayden swung his knife and cut across. Then a huge sword energy enough to slash the warship appeared from Hayden's ice blade, and in the blink of an eye, the next moment it was about to slash the big bird on the opposite side. However, the big bird escaped his slash without any effort. What? How is this possible? Hayden couldn't believe his eyes. At such a close distance, his slashes could still cut the air. Is the impact of this reaction so severe? The nausea that affects him all the time, even if Hayden has forced himself to ignore its influence, the effect that always affects still exists. Advertisement. FK. Seeing his own slasher failed, Hayden retreated a little distance. And the big bird that escaped the attack opened its mouth again. Boom. Another sonic attack that was visible to the naked eye swept across instantly. Similarly, Hayden could not avoid it. The unspeakable tingling sensation in the brain really made Hayden unable to react, and his consciousness was directly disturbed by the sound waves. At the same time, the flock of birds that Hayden broke through just now also returned under the instructions of Big Bird, and pierced against Hayden, who was temporarily immobile in the sky. The sharp beaks of birds that can pierce the bones of ordinary beasts, under the action of high-speed flight, they carry more powerful offensive. Laugh, laugh, laugh. 1, 2, 3. The huge number of birds instantly wrapped Hayden's small body into a giant ball, and then all cut across Hayden's body with a sharp beak. Hayden couldn't move, he couldn't use the iron block, he couldn't move a slash, and he couldn't even move a finger. At this moment, his body could only let the birds attack. In just an instant, Hayden's body was completely bloody, and even a whole piece of skin could not be seen, and the whole person became a blood man. What? The violent tearing sensation conveyed the pain caused by entering the brain, which made Hayden roar. This sorrowful roar unexpectedly dispelled the flock of birds that had wrapped him at the moment. Then, Hayden's body lost its support in the air, and his limbs naturally hung down weakly. After the liberation, Baishui's sleeve was already torn apart in the process of being torn. Hayden in midair fell quickly to the ground under the action of gravity, and the same was true for the sleeve Baishui that slipped from his hands. Advertisement. In the process of falling, Hayden still had some remaining consciousness sober, as if it was like a boat in the stormy sea, which could be broken at any time. In the blurry vision covered in blood, Hayden looked at the empty sky above, and the ceiling of the third floor was gradually pulling away from him. He realized that he seemed to hit the ground unpreparedly in the next second. Hayden didn't know if his body could hold this height and directly hit the ground, but it seems that his current situation seems to be no different. Even though Hayden wanted to do something at this moment, a lot of blood had been flowing out of his body from just now, and he had no remaining strength. At this moment, Hayden seemed to have an inexplicable feeling that he was about to hit the ground, but he heard a strange sound in his ears, a calm and unconscious voice that made people feel at ease. Say my name. With determination, with faith, with all you have so far, speak out. Take the different you buried in your heart, and speak out. Quote. Then, it will truly become your strength. Time stopped at this moment. After a second of silence, Hayden tentatively said out, Shazam. Say my name. Hayden had enlightenment in his heart at this time. Spread it. Senbon Sakura. When the words fell, Hayden smashed his head towards the ground, causing an explosion of smoke. Chapter 74 Senbon Sakura. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Senbon Sakura. In the blurry bloody vision, he saw a flash of brilliant cherry blossoms, and Hayden didn't understand what happened to him for a while. At this moment, his entire blood-stained body was floating on pink cherry blossom petals, as if countless feather-like cherry blossom petals were holding him up and hanging in the air. And the cherry blossom petals that are constantly circulating around his body are so easy to dream. Looking at and feeling the strange hilt in his left hand at this moment, Hayden looked at the cherry blossoms that wrapped him into a ball. An unreal feeling suddenly appeared in Hayden's brain. He thought it was because he had actually smashed into the ground, and then he died before appearing such a strange scenery. However, the sound that seemed to have come to his ears from a distant edge just now, it will feel so real in retrospect. The feeling of the cherry blossoms surrounding him is so real, Hayden can even feel the inexplicable familiar feeling conveyed to him on the small petals, as if he only had to move the knife in his left handle, and then all the cherry blossom petals will follow their own commands. Although he knew what he did just now, Hajime understood Senbon Sakura, who did not know where it came from. Senbon Sakura is the Zanpaku sword of Byakuya Kuchiki, the captain of the 13th Division 6th Division of the Gote Division of the God of Death. After the initial solution, Senbon Sakura's blade will be broken down into countless invisible thin blades. When the blade is flying in the air, it will naturally refract light. It looks like countless withered cherry blossoms, hence the name Senbon Sakura. But he hasn't exchanged points for other Zanpaku knives. Feeling the spiritual pressure that seems to be continuously emerging from the bottom of my heart, the wounds on my body are gradually repairing and recovering. Hayden didn't plan to think about where the 1,000 cherry blossoms came from for the time being. The only thing I need to think about now is how to prevent the big bird's voice attack and not let it break its defense as soon as it is released. Advertisement. The weak limbs also gradually returned to a barely active state, and Hayden swept away the Chiban Sakura thin blade that wrapped him. Then, he smashed his butt. Senbon Sakura can control Hayden, his master, who does not hurt him. On the contrary, Senbon Sakura wrapped Hayden into a ball. His periphery was inevitably like a sander, cutting everything he touched all the time. Not to mention just now, in order to catch Hayden, who had fallen from a high altitude, Chiban Sakura, who had turned into countless petals and thin blades, drilled 3 or 4 meters into the ground to stop the impact of the fall. Hayden wiped his blood-stained eyes vigorously with his blood-stained arms, and the line of sight in front of him immediately became clearly visible. He was sitting in the pit now. He didn't plan to stay in the pit for a second, and jumped out of the pit with a slight leap. The dazzling thin blades immediately gathered in front of Hayden. Even if he did not consciously control this murderous cherry blossom storm, Shinbin Sakura would automatically circle around him, protecting like countless loyal soldiers. Hold him. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Hayden took a deep breath of the cold air, and the cool sensation then entered the depths of his lungs and at the same time awake his brain. The temperature effect caused by the snow on his sleeves always existed. Although it was an unbearable cold for ordinary people, it made Hayden extremely comfortable. Looking up at the sky, Hayden noticed that the big bird in the sky and the countless bird flocks under it seemed to be planning to return to the nest. However, half-blood resurrected, he didn't plan to let them go so easily. The kind of heartache that I hadn't experienced in those 2 lifetimes just now, the soul was attacked by piercing him from all directions, and the body was actually attacked from all directions, from up, down, left and right. The kind of pain that seemed as if the whole world was squeezing your body into a ball in a moment, made Hayden miserable. At that moment, Hayden seemed to be pushed to the pinnacle of pain by countless birds. Recalling now, he seemed to have seen the picture of the original world at that time, and then the world was gradually darkening. It seemed that only a second before he was about to fall into the darkness. Advertisement. Hayden blinked, and his gaze returned to the real world. At this moment, the position of the big bird and its flock in the sky above has gradually moved away. Damn, die for the Lord. He said that Hayden started instantly, and first went to get back the fallen sleeve Baishui. Then, directly face the big bird and kill it. Chiban Sakura, sleeve Shirayuki. Hayden held the hilt of Senbon Sakura in his left hand, and Shirayuki's sleeve that had just been released in his right hand. The pure white ribbon at the end of the sleeve Shirayuki's handle fluttered in flight, and Shinbon Sakura, whose body turned into thousands of cherry blossom petals, surged behind him. The black hair dyed with blood was flying in the wind, and the spiritual pressure that surrounded him was gradually growing, and Hayden in fast flight was now stronger than ever before. Mind, consciousness, Zhanpakudao, all things are connected together at this moment. Call. Hayden swallowed a cloud of white mist from his mouth. After blinking, he caught up with the big bird that was almost gone. He didn't know why the big bird didn't make up the knife while he was falling. Maybe it was just that the big bird was too confident in its attack and didn't make up the knife. But this was its own business, he didn't plan to think about it, and he regretted that it missed a great opportunity. Because, as a beast. What is the date on February 6, 1508 in Haiyuan calendar? In the evening, it almost killed the strongest man in the future great world. Hayden felt a burst of excitement in his heart when he thought about it. For a moment, Hayden's figure was silently attached to the top of Big Bird's head. With his legs straddling the neck of the gate chief bird, its long and dense feathers are really comfortable to rub. Advertisement. It's just that its size is a bit abnormal, and it's not suitable for straddling. Hayden nodded his head and touched his neck to study the matter. Thinking about this, Hayden's sleeve Baishui directly inserted its neck and stood up. The bird's stable flight attitude immediately received feedback, and his body suddenly shook. Ouch! With the shaking, Hayden couldn't help holding the hilt of Shirayuki's knife and twisting it subconsciously. As early as when Shu Baishui's blade pierced into its body, the place where the blade touched was instantly frozen. This will be stirred by Hayden again. Shu Baishui poke a big hole directly behind the big bird.
Boom! The unknown big bird then instinctively released a sonic attack again, and then hurriedly rushed forward, and quickly ordered the few birds left behind after it had been disbanded to pounce behind it, defending it and feeling it. The attack came from behind. Hayden standing on the big bird was naturally attacked by the sound waves in an instant. But this time, Hayden put on his sleeve Baishui, and he responded quickly and pulled out of the big bird, and then his body flew backwards uncontrollably.
Fortunately, Senbon Sakura, who had been following, steadily caught his body, and the thousands of thin blades in the shape of a wave instantly transformed into a spherical shape, and then gradually sunk in with Hayden's upside-down posture. It just turned into a shape that could hold Hayden's body. FK. Chapter 75. Once the dragon is cut, the sky will fall. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Repeatedly and again can't be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. How many times have you done this? After just 5 or 6 seconds, Hayden slowed over. The feeling he didn't want to try again swept through his body time and time again. Special. Hayden opened his eyes and looked at the big bird in front of him in a state of panic. The big bird waited until Hayden's sleeve Baishui pierced its body before sensing something standing on it. Will your defensive skills be this trick? Hayden didn't expect this big bird to be able to answer his questions. He spread out the Senbon Sakura who had caught him, and let Senbon Sakura hover behind him, stepping on the condensed foothold, staring at the front, trying to twist his neck, but because of his abnormal body shape, it appeared at this moment. The movements are very funny. The big bird can only feel the kind of chill that is always passed to it from behind. As for the pain, Hayden's sleeve Baishui seemed to freeze its pain instantly. At the moment, the big bird puts Shanghai on his back and inserts into the position of the sleeve Baishui. The rest of the birds guarding around it can only see a large hole full of terrifying ice and cold in their sight. There is no bloody color in the big hole, nor any internal muscles, just a pure frozen appearance. Against the backdrop of the dark feathers, the appearance of the big hole is particularly eye-catching. At this time, suddenly, Hayden felt that his movements seemed to return to a normal state. He tried to wave his right arm, and the delay that made him feel nauseous seemed to really disappear. Looking at the big bird ahead that would have noticed him, the corner of Hayden's mouth couldn't help but raised slightly. It seems that the time for your ghost skills has almost arrived. The big bird flapped its huge wings, and its keen eyes stared at the human that it should have already dealt with, but it didn't know how to reappear. The unidentified feeling just now must have been caused by this human being. Although it will not feel how serious the wound behind it is, even after it feels the first sting, it will no longer feel the pain from the wound. Advertisement. But it is very clear that the dangers that are not felt in this world are the most dangerous. It will slowly take away your vitality in silence, bit by bit, until you haven't even noticed it, you've already plunged into darkness. Even if he realized something in his brain at the end, he was already powerless. Just as Shu Baishui's extreme cold ability, when he perceives it, he has fallen into the extreme cold created by Shu Baishui. At this moment, Big Bird is in a crisis that has never been encountered before. The little ant, which was originally effortless to clean up, can threaten it. The big bird stared at Hayden and directed the few remaining flocks of birds to rush up. And it naturally follows behind the flock of birds, and it has to deal with this human directly. HMPH. Is the biological instincts pressing you? Seeing the big bird attack directly, come on, just right. Hayden said silently. He was very aware of the knife that was inserted just now, how hard he was, and how deep the wound he had just opened on it. Senbon Sakura. Hayden's left hand holding the handle of Shinbenzakura suddenly waved in the direction of the birds. Behind him, thousands of cherry blossom petals that looked like a whirlpool were spinning and rushing in the direction of the birds. Past. The innumerable thin blades became more frightening in the process of spinning and accelerating, and gradually turned into a slender tornado storm in the sky. At this time, the setting sun was setting, and the fiery red glow reflected on the countless thin blades was slowly dyeing the color of the petals into the color of the setting sun. It was so colorful that it made people want to embrace this blade storm. Hayden also took action at the same time, closely following the Chiban Sakura that he swung. In this way, Hayden and Big Bird were both rushing towards each other at this moment. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. At the same time, in the empty sky, Smog and Kuwati came back to see this scene. The two fast tracks in the sky that are really hard to ignore are about to collide. Chi 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 chi. In the next second, a rain of blood began to fall in the sky. Hayden's Senbon Sakura collided with the flock of birds directly opposite. Naturally, the flock of mortal birds could not be compared with the Shinbenzakura that turned into thousands of thin blades. When the first flap of the thin blade was first touched, the birds that came into contact with the flock of birds were immediately broken in two ruthlessly. Then, Chiban Sakura instantly seemed to pass through a place of nothing, without staying in the slightest, and mercilessly harvesting anything that touched him. Advertisement. As a result, a rain of blood exploded in the sky immediately, and it fell to the ground. At the same time, the sight of Hayden and Bird was blocked. As that Hayden. Small wasn't sure that Hayden had released the attack just now, but it seemed that there was no one else besides him at this time. Hui Di looked at the sky above, that feeling should be Hayden. He frowned. It's just that the effect of the attack seems to be different from his usual. Hayden in the sky didn't have any thoughts of stopping, and the sleeve of his right hand, by Shuesuo, two flying slashes towards the front of the blood red that obscured the line of sight. Shinbin Sakura, who was in the front, got the induction to automatically make two gaps for the frozen sword chi. The two icy sword chi froze in an instant, and the blood rain that hadn't had time to fall wherever it could be, solidified and formed immediately. Then, the ice cube mixed with blood was smashed by the big bird that rushed out immediately. Hayden reacted swiftly and immediately manipulated Senbon Sakura to contract Tori's body quickly. Under Hayden's conscious control, the speed of thousands of thin blades as light as a feather reached a terrifying point, and all of them pierced into the body of the bird in an instant. He emphatically attacked the part where the big bird made the sound, pierced in with a thin blade, and then sprayed a huge amount of thick fresh blood from the big bird's body. Then the big bird didn't seem to be conscious at all, and he didn't care at all, still rushing towards Hayden's body. The huge wings slammed into one, and the sky was full of blood. At the moment, Big Bird had no idea in his mind that could stop it, and then controlled his body to start to spin, and slammed again a few times. At this time, the blood flowing from its body is mixed behind it, in the local shock wave visible to the naked eye due to the incredible flight speed, as if its body shape stretched a bit at this moment, opening its exaggerated tail wing. Why does it increase to this speed even if it disregards Hayden's attack? That's because all its sound waves, special substances, bird flocks, etc. are not its real attacks. Its sharp beak, the sharp beak that it attacked at such an astonishing speed is its real big move. Hayden's eyes can even be seen from the center point where the big bird rushes, that is, a ray of fire is seen on its beak, and then a ray of fire from the beak of the next second spreads to its whole body instantly. Mingmeng, bathed in the burning flames, at this moment, seems to be incarnate as the legendary phoenix. Senbon Sakura's thin blade was also driven out of Tori due to the attack of flames. Seeing the menacing bird, Hayden didn't panic at all. Advertisement. It's actually a flame power. Hayden retracted Shinbenzakura's initial solution, and held Shinbenzakura in his mouth with his teeth, and his hands closed Shirayuki's sleeves. The roast turkey in his sight seemed to attack him in the next second, and Hayden, without the slightest panic, slowly held the tip of the sleeve Baishui knife behind him. Then he pressed his chin enough to touch his knees, closed his eyes, and held the handle of Shirayuki's sword in both hands to gather the spiritual pressure of his whole body to this point. Immediately afterwards, the flames burning on the big bird had already jumped onto his hair. For a moment, Hayden waved his hands. One slashing dragon. Boom. Hayden slashed up with the knife, cutting out a terrifying sky. The extreme cold vertical slash did not stop at all because of anything in front of it. From Hayden's position in the sky to a long distance, the rising icy breath even almost touched the sky above. The third layer of plates, even if it is air, is frozen. In the twilight, a cold current in the sky that seemed to spread from the depths of the extreme swept across the world, and this scene could be seen even on the warships on the coast. And the two of Smog and Kui below were already stunned. The dust settled. Hayden slowly took out Senbon Sakura from his mouth, holding Senbon Sakura in his left hand, and sleeve Shirayuki in his right hand. Looking at the wide and vast scenery he had created before him, he took a deep breath, feeling the fresh cold air swirling in his lungs. What? Oh, the big bird was frozen into an ice sculpture in an instant. After being cut open, it smashed into the ground into countless pieces of fine ice.